Chapter 2306, Tier 3 Evolution Mana Crystal. To most players, this item was only a relatively rare material or decent energy source, but to Shifeng, a mana crystal was just as valuable as 7 luminaries crystals. They were so valuable to him because he could use mana crystals to evolve the abyssal blade. Shifeng had tasked Melancholic Smile to purchase mana crystals for that very purpose, but she had yet to find any. Learning that these void worms dropped the mana crystals had certainly come as a surprise. The abyssal blade was significantly helpful. In its current state, the magic weapon was as powerful as a top-tier epic weapon of the same level. Unfortunately, Shifeng couldn't afford to level up the weapon due to how many fine gold and dark gold weapons the upgrade required. The higher level a weapon was, the rarer it would be. Obtaining level 90 plus fine gold weapons was quite challenging at this stage of the game, not to mention level 90 plus dark gold weapons. Because its level had stagnated, the abyssal blade wasn't suitable for Shifeng at this point. However, Shifeng couldn't just abandon the weapon. Even if he stopped using it, the curse within the abyssal blade would still exist, and he'd periodically have to face the backlashes. Not only would the curse grow stronger as the magic weapon evolved, but it would also grow stronger as time passed, which was why players had been so afraid of magic weapons in Shifeng's previous life. Although magic weapons could be a massive asset to players, they'd also become a greater burden as players leveled up. Of course, if players could maintain the magic weapons' growth as they reached higher levels, the weapons would offer more pros than cons, and after a certain point, they'd become even stronger than epic weapons. Unfortunately, it was very difficult to maintain that growth rate during the later stages of the game. Otherwise, fewer players would have fallen to their magic weapons' backlash in the past. Shifeng stored the mana crystal in his bag and continued to hunt void worms while steadily approaching the center of the island. The void land was as large as a medium-sized leveling map in the outside world, and as Shifeng grew closer to the island's core, he encountered more void worms. The monster's respawn rate increased as he traveled, as well. Even with Anna and Kite's help, Shifeng prioritized caution. While the 2 personal guards could withstand the Great Lord's attacks, he couldn't. Although slaying these void worms was monotonous, the bountiful EXP and occasional mana crystal motivated Shifeng. He took barely any breaks from hunting the Great Lords. After a full day of combat, Shifeng's experience bar had reached 99% of level 100. He just needed one more kill to level up, but he decided to wait for a moment. He locked his experience bar and summoned his Thunder Eagle, allowing the flying mount to benefit from the awarded EXP instead. Flying mounts and land mounts had different mechanics. While land mounts' levels would be determined by their owner's level, flying mounts had their own experience bars. This was why nurturing a flying mount was so troublesome. This quest, fortunately, offered the perfect opportunity for Shifeng to nurture his Thunder Eagle. Flying mounts in God's domain were an exceptional mode of transportation, but they were also capable fighters. For players to grow stronger, they had to constantly improve their levels, equipment, skills, and other aspects. Flying mounts, however, only needed to level up. It was easier for these mounts to evolve through their tiers than it was for players. Thus, it had become common practice for experts to disregard their levels temporarily to level up their flying mounts. The Thunder Eagle was an intermediate extraordinary flying mount, born with the strength of a great lord and extremely high growth potential. At level 100, its combat power might only be at the lower tier 3 rank, but once it reached level 110, it would rise to the intermediate tier 3 rank. At level 120, its combat power would further increase to the tier 3 upper rank standard. Aside from frantically grinding, Shifeng occasionally logged out to rest his mind and provide guidance for some of his guild members. Guild leader, Warblood and Starlink are growing restless. They're not doing much right now, but I've heard that they've decided to help 13 Thrones capture a medium fortress in the Gravity Mountain range, Blackie reported. Currently, the Northern Fortress's player population is only over 900,000. If Warblood and Starlink succeed, I'm afraid it'll affect the Northern Fortress's development. Should we send people to sabotage their plan? Since the Northern Fortress was the sole medium fortress in the Gravity Mountain range, it generated astronomical sums of credits and ancient gold each day. But if the various powers captured another medium fortress, the Northern Fortress's profits would decrease. That won't be necessary. Although we have a feud with Warblood and Starlink, we have nothing against 13 thrones, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Moreover, capturing a medium fortress is easier said than done. Just focus on managing our own fortress. I'm still busy with my Tier 3 promotion quest and won't be back anytime soon. For now, try to buy as many plots of land near the World Tower as possible with the ancient gold we've earned. If he hadn't summoned the Tier 4 hero, Zero Wing wouldn't have been able to capture the Northern Fortress, even with the Phoenix Pavilion's help. Moreover, securing the lands around the World Tower was far more important than worrying about a fortress in another corner of the Gravity Mountain range. All right. I'll make the purchases as soon as we have the money, Blackie responded. Although he was a little disappointed that he couldn't cause some trouble for Starlink and Warblood, his anticipation began to build with the thought of the lands near the World Tower. Shifeng had explained these plots' function, and if Zero Wing could claim every one of the lands available, Dragonheart City's various powers would live in fear of their guild. After training the guild's members, Shifeng quickly returned to God's domain and continued to venture deeper into the barren island. With the Thunder Eagle as a part of his party, the party's overall DPS had considerably increased, and as a result, Shifeng was able to advance much faster than before. After 3 days of grinding, Shifeng had moved into the island's inner region. The 3-day grind also allowed the Thunder Eagle to climb to level 103. Shifeng knew that flying mounts didn't need as much EXP as players to level up, but he couldn't help his surprise at the Thunder Eagle's leveling speed. Shifeng had also obtained 73 mana crystals from the slain void worms. His harvest here was more than enough to cover the mana stone cost of entering the void land. When he reached the inner region, he found a translucent barrier enveloping the area. The inner region looked like a completely different world compared to the outer region. The island's outer area had been a barren wasteland, while a lush forest occupied the inner region. Within this lush forest, Shifeng spotted graves of varying sizes. The smallest were simply dirt mounds, while the larger graves looked like majestic palaces. He also spotted a large number of undead wandering through this graveyard. Forgotten Spirit, Undead Creature, Lord, Level 101 HP 40,000/40,000,000. These forgotten spirits weren't much of a threat. Shifeng could easily take them out in a one-on-one fight. Unfortunately, these undead moved in groups of several dozen. Not even Shifeng was confident of surviving a battle against so many Lord-ranked monsters. Each grave was also guarded by heroic spirits of varying strengths. Heroic spirits were the remnants of departed NPC heroes. They might not be as powerful as they had been in life, but the Tier 3 heroic spirits could easily slaughter Tier 3 players, not to mention a lowly Tier 2 player like Shifeng. Even Tier 3 players have little hope of surviving in this place. Shifeng could not help but frown at the undead wandering within the magic barrier. He'd have no choice but to flee from a one-on-one battle with a level 100, Tier 3 heroic spirit. Fortunately, he had personal guards like Anna and Kite to support him. Otherwise, finding the Blade's Saint legacy would be utterly impossible. The instant Shifeng stepped through the translucent barrier, however, Kite, Anna, the Tier 3 demons, and his Thunder Eagle vanished. A silencing barrier? Shifeng stared at the barrier, stunned. God's domain had many types of magic barriers, and although barriers that nullified summoning-type magic arrays were rare, they could be found in certain ancient ruins. Finding such a magic barrier here was a nightmare. An ordinary level 100, Tier 2 expert wouldn't even be a match for the Lord-ranked Forgotten Spirits in a one-on-one fight. Even a Domain Realm expert would have to flee for their lives when encountering several dozen Forgotten Spirits. As for the level 100, Tier 3 heroic spirits, Domain Realm experts wouldn't even last more than 3 seconds. It's no wonder why so few people with peak legacies managed to complete their Tier 3 promotion quest. Shifeng sighed ruefully as he observed the undead around him. With how the Forgotten Spirits were positioned, Shifeng couldn't find any loopholes to exploit. Defeating these undead would be impossible with the strength of a level 100, Tier 2 player. He would need an entire 100-man team of level 100, Tier 2 experts to accomplish the feat, right? If one's not enough, I just need to face them in a group. Struck with inspiration, Shifeng stepped through the barrier and summoned Kite and Anna again. He returned to grinding void worms, planning to collect the 100 mana crystals he needed to evolve the Abyssal Blade. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU of the weapons at hand, the Abyssal Blade allowed him to execute the highest number of attacks simultaneously. With 9 Dragon's Slash, he could summon 16 Abyssal Blade Phantoms, which not even the Twilight Blade could do. If he could upgrade the Abyssal Blade to Tier 3, 9 Dragon's Slash would undergo a qualitative transformation, allowing him to summon even more phantoms. It might just be enough to help him defeat so many monsters. With this plan in mind, Shifeng spent another day or so slaying void worms, eventually gathering the 100 mana crystals. The instant Shifeng picked up the 100th mana crystal, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, 100 mana crystals detected. Conditions to evolve the Abyssal Blade met. Do you wish to evolve the Abyssal Blade? Retrieving the long-forgotten magic weapon from his bag, Shifeng took a deep breath and declared, Evolve. Chapter 2307, Tier 3 Abyssal Blade. The moment Shifeng tapped on the Evolve * button, the Abyssal Blade transformed into a cloud of black fog that moved toward his bag. The black fog began to devour every mana crystal in his bag like a ravenous wolf. The mana within the mana crystals was only slightly less pure than within 7 Luminaries crystals, and a single mana crystal contained enough mana to obliterate a small town from the face of the continent. When the Abyssal Blade devoured all 100 mana crystals, space around Shifeng trembled violently with the transfer of such a frightening amount of energy. At the same time, a dragon's roar echoed across the island. It felt as if space were about to explode, making room for a dragon's arrival. Is this a backlash? Shifeng's expression darkened. With every evolution, there was a chance that the magic weapon would release a backlash, and each backlash would be stronger than the last. If the weapon's owner couldn't cope with a single backlash, it would cripple their account. Initially, Shifeng had been confident of contending with a potential second backlash, but based on the mana fluctuations he sensed, he doubted that he had more than a 50% chance of surviving. Fortunately, the mana only fluctuated for a few moments. After 3 seconds, the island returned to normal, and a pitch-black sword, decorated with engraved, draconic patterns, appeared some distance away. Despite standing 5 yards away from the Abyssal Blade, Shifeng could feel the magic weapon's intense dragon might weighing him down. His heels even sunk into the ground. Abyssal Blade, one-handed sword, magic weapon, attack power plus 4055, all attributes plus 320, attack speed plus 33, ignore levels plus 25, attacks have 70% chance to cause 250% damage. 40% chance to cause 300% damage. Every attack increases damage by 2% to a maximum of 30%. If wielder belongs to a swordsman-related class, all skill levels plus 6. Increase free ability points received for every increase in level by 2 points. Equipment level 80. Can be upgraded, devour 40 level 85 dark gold weapons to upgrade to level 85. Equipment Tier 3. Can be evolved, devour 5 god crystals to evolve to Tier 4. Additional active skill 1, Phantom Kill, Tier 3. Instantly creates a doppelganger under the wielder's control. Doppelganger has 95% of the wielder's attributes and all skills. The wielder can swap positions with the doppelganger at any time. Duration, 2 minutes cooldown, 5 minutes. Additional active skill 2, Abyssal Bind, Tier 3. Binds up to 5 enemies simultaneously and prevents movement, reducing defense and magic resistance by 100%. The higher tiered the target is, the weaker the effect will be. Duration, 5 seconds cooldown, 40 seconds. Additional active skill 3, 9 Dragon's Slash, Tier 3. Instantly creates 21 phantoms of the abyssal blade for wielder's use. Each phantom sword deals up to 80% damage. Duration, 60 seconds cooldown, 8 minutes additional active skill 4, Abyssal Curse, Tier 3. Prevents all targets within a 100-yard radius from moving or attacking for 6 seconds and reduces their attributes by 20% for 10 minutes. Effect doubles if there is only one target in range. Cooldown, 30 minutes additional active skill 5, Dragon Soul, Tier 3. Grants a doppelganger a dragon soul, transforming it into a black dragon. The transformed doppelganger will have the same life rating as a black dragon and can use the skill Dragon Breath. Duration, 5 minutes cooldown, 24 hours additional passive skill, Abyssal Will. Improves wielder's physique depending on the surrounding mana density. The higher the mana density, the greater the improvement. Additional profound inheritance, Black Emperor, Tier 3. When activated, every critical hit will accumulate 1 stack of death aura. Each stack can be used to increase all attributes by 4% and attack speed and movement speed by 3% for 12 seconds or to reduce the cooldown of a skill by 5 seconds. Maximum of 27 stacks of death aura. Duration, 10 minutes cooldown, 6 hours. The famed smith Olysses personally created the Abyssal Blade using the Black Dragon King's fangs as material. It is one of 36 famed swords, ranking 31st. However, the Black Dragon King himself has cursed this sword. Beyond the immense strength the blade offers, the wielder must face a backlash after a certain amount of time. However, after Jack had remodeled the Abyssal Blade with a star crystal, the strength of the backlash has been reduced greatly. If the wielder is unable to suppress the backlash, the wielder will receive the Black Dragon King's curse, permanently reducing all attributes by 50%. Unable to be dropped. Unable to be traded. Unable to be destroyed. So powerful. Shurfeng was stunned when he saw the evolved Abyssal Blade's attribute panel. The Abyssal Blade's attributes might not compare to the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray quite yet, but its attributes could rival that of a top-tier level 85 epic weapon, despite being only a level 80 magic weapon. However, the improved attributes weren't the most shocking aspect. The Abyssal Blade's skills had drastically improved now that it was a Tier 3 weapon. Now, it was the perfect weapon to use against groups. Not even an ordinary fragmented legendary weapon would be its match in this regard. Seeing the Tier 3 Abyssal Blade, Shurfeng couldn't even imagine how much it would improve once it reached Tier 4. Of course, evolving the magic weapon further would be immensely more difficult than it had been thus far, requiring god crystals, and 5 of them, at that. One could only rely on luck to find god crystals, which were even rarer and more difficult to locate than epic weapons. Shurfeng then unequipped Killing Ray, replacing it with the Abyssal Blade. So, this is the Abyssal Blade's power after another evolution? As he equipped the magic weapon, Shurfeng was astounded. His attack power and basic attributes might have decreased, but he was more compatible with the Abyssal Blade than he was with Killing Ray. The weapon felt like an extension of his body in his hand, and it was now unimaginably sharp. In its current state, the Abyssal Blade could easily slice through a level 100+ Great Lord scales. Moreover, the magic weapon's effects had substantially improved, and he could feel his physique growing considerably stronger. Despite replacing Killing Ray with a lower-leveled weapon, his overall combat power hadn't decreased in the slightest. Rather, it had risen. After taking a moment to familiarize himself with the upgraded Abyssal Blade, Shurfeng shifted his attention to the graves within the inner region. The goal of his promotion quest was to locate the Lost Blade's Saint Legacy. Obviously, it should be inside one of those graves. The countless forgotten spirits wandering through the forest and the heroic spirits guarding each grave were the only obstacles in his way. A few minutes ago, Shurfeng had been helpless against the wandering forgotten spirits, but now that he had the Tier 3 Abyssal Blade, defeating the undead wouldn't be a problem. Now, he only had to figure out a way to distract the heroic spirits while he opened the graves. Unfortunately, since he didn't know which grave contained the legacy, he decided to challenge heroic spirit guarding the nearest and smallest grave. The instant Shurfeng crossed through the translucent barrier, the undead roaming near the chosen grave sensed Shifeng's aura and charged toward him. Although the forgotten spirits didn't have very high intellect, even a peak expert would have to flee if several dozen attacked together. Go! Shifeng immediately activated 9 Dragons Slash. Like a group of experts, the 21 Abyssal Blade Phantoms flew forth to open a path for Shifeng. Although each phantom only possessed 90% of Shifeng's strength, the attribute was just as high as an actual level 100, Tier 3 players. As a result, the Abyssal Blade Phantoms effortlessly suppressed the approaching forgotten spirits. With one exchange, the phantoms shoved aside the several dozen undead, allowing Shifeng to reach the small grave. This is a resting place for the dead. The living have no place here, the spear-wielding Tier 3 heroic spirit guarding the grave bellowed as he thrust his spear at Shifeng. Forgotten heroic spirit, undead, Tier 3 Berserker King, level 10 HP 54,000/54,000,000. Although the heroic spirit did not have a lot of HP, he employed an advanced combat technique with that simple thrust, causing his opponent to ignore the weapon unconsciously. Moreover, the attack contained peak Tier 3 power, easily enough to repulse level 100+ Grand Lords. If this attack struck a Tier 3 player, they'd die instantly. Witnessing the heroic spirit's strength, Shifeng lost any confidence in defeating the undead. Fortunately, he didn't actually plan to fight the heroic spirit. Shifeng responded to the attack by using Phantom Kill, sending his doppelganger forward while activating Defensive Blade to block the strike. Shifeng then rushed toward the grave. The moment Shifeng touched the grave, a prompt window appeared before him. System: do you wish to activate the grave and absorb a portion of the grave owner's legacy? Ecstatic, Shifeng activated the grave. However, a loading bar appeared the moment he did. Activating the grave would require a total of 8 seconds. When the heroic spirit sensed the grave's activation, he flew into a rage. Ignoring Shifeng's doppelganger, the heroic spirit dashed toward the offending player. Sure enough, this won't be that easy. As the heroic spirit ran toward him, Shifeng stopped holding back. He had his doppelganger activate its legacy berserk skill, Blade Liberation, focusing all of his attention on controlling the doppelganger as it attacked the heroic spirit. Lightning Flash. A web of sword lights enveloped the heroic spirit, yet the undead didn't seem concerned in the least. He spun and met the attack with his spear. Pung! 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 The sounds of clanging metal echoed throughout the forest. Not only had the heroic spirit blocked every sword light the doppelganger had sent at him, but he managed to do so without stumbling a single step backward. The doppelganger wasn't a match for the heroic spirit, but Shifeng didn't care. His only goal was to delay the Tier 3 heroic spirit for 8 seconds, not defeat him. Shifeng finally absorbed a portion of the grave owner's legacy as he sacrificed his doppelganger. As he did, a legacy completion rate section had appeared in his quest window. System: legacy completion rate 15%. Do you wish to accept this legacy? So, that's how this works. Shifeng immediately understood how he was supposed to complete his promotion quest. Every grave in this lush forest contained the Blade Saint legacy, but each grave contained a different completion rate of the legacy, which couldn't be combined. It was up to him to decide how much of the legacy he wanted to leave with. Following which, Shifeng abandoned the completion rate he had acquired from the small grave and escaped through the barrier. The moment he crossed the magic barrier, the forgotten spirits and heroic spirit chasing him gave up and returned to their original positions. Now that he understood his quest's mechanics, Shifeng set his sights on the higher quality graves in the island's inner region. Naturally, the more magnificent graves were guarded by stronger heroic spirits. The largest grave sat within the forest's core, as opulent as a palace with a level 100, Tier 4 heroic spirit standing guard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The graves that were a grade inferior to the palace-like grave in the center were protected by heroic spirits with titles. Heroic spirits that earned a title after their deaths had been heroes among heroes during their lives. Killing Apex experts of the same tier would have been child's play. Although they had lost a significant portion of the strength after death, they could still kill Apex experts with little to no effort. I can only give it a try. Shifeng gritted his teeth as he set his sights on a greatsword wielding, titled Heroic Spirit. He knew he had no hope of activating the grandest grave in the cemetery. The gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 existences was massive, let alone the gap between Tier 2 and Tier 4. The moment the Tier 4 Heroic Spirit noticed him, he'd die. However, he wasn't willing to settle for third-grade graves. After all, the legacy's completion rate would severely affect the Tier 3 promotion quest's rewards. At the very least, he had to try for the second-grade graves. Once his skills cooldowns had finished, Shifeng dashed into the inner region once more, running straight for a grave that was the size of a small high-rise. Chapter 2308, Abyssal Blades. Shifeng's target was near the center of the forest. Simply approaching it would be incredibly difficult due to the groups of forgotten spirits that moved closer together near the forest's core. If Shifeng relied on his own strength to reach the grave, he wouldn't get close to it, much less activate it. Several hundred forgotten spirits flew toward him, and Shifeng felt his scalp go numb. Fortunately, he was barely able to keep the forgotten spirits out of attack range with the 21 abyssal blades fighting for him. 9 Dragon Slash had a time limit, however, so he couldn't stop the undead like this forever. Although Shifeng was confident that he could escape these monsters with his life, if he couldn't keep the forgotten spirits at bay, that would be it. He wouldn't be able to do anything more. If he wished to secure the second-grade legacy, it was crucial that he utilized 9 Dragon Slash's duration efficiently. It took me 42 seconds to reach this grave, which is about as long as I estimated. Glancing at 9 Dragon Slash's remaining duration, Shifeng breathed a sigh of relief. I should be able to activate the grave within the remaining time. There were 2 reasons that Shifeng had passed up the highest grade grave. Naturally, the first was the Tier 4 Heroic Spirit that guarded it. His second reason was the lack of time. Reaching and activating the second-grade graves within 9 Dragon Slash's 60-second duration was his limit. Before Shifeng could catch his breath, the silver-armored, greatsword-wielding heroic spirit that guarded the gravestone abruptly opened his eyes. A faint, red barrier then enveloped the gravesite, decreasing Shifeng's basic attributes and physique by 20%. Urdia, Flame Knight, Heroic Spirit, Tier 3 Berserker King, Level 101 HP 78,000/78,000,000 a domain? Shifeng's expression darkened as he stared at Urdia. Shifeng had assumed that Urdia had the strength to instant-kill Tier 3 players, but he had never thought that the heroic spirit would be this powerful. Urdia might not have a lot more HP than the heroic spirit he had fought earlier, but he was definitely much stronger. Purely regarding basic attributes, he had to be 30% stronger than the forgotten heroic spirit. In combination with its domain, which only Tier 4 NPCs and above could grasp, Urdia could squash Tier 3 players like ants. I commend your bravery, adventurer. Over the several millennia I have stood guard, you're the first to dare approach in search of the Blade Saint's legacy. I hope you can offer some entertainment, Urdia leisurely commented. Unlike the forgotten heroic spirit, which had attacked immediately, he joked around like a player as he slowly approached Shifeng. Seeing this, a chill crawled down Shifeng's spine. They might be dead heroes, but heroic spirits weren't considered NPCs in God's domain. Because of this, their intellect shouldn't be as high as NPCs. However, that was obviously not the case for Urdia. This was also the first time Shifeng had encountered such an intelligent heroic spirit. Seeing that Urdia was already 50 yards away, Shifeng activated the Ring of Gospel's miniature world and Ring of Brilliance as a precaution. Unfortunately, Shifeng could tell that wouldn't be enough after the 2 skills had taken effect. He then activated Blade Liberation to bolster his basic attributes further, and at the same time, he activated the Twilight Blades Twilight of the Gods and Twilight's Shadow, splitting into 8 clones. With Twilight of the Gods and Blade Liberation active, Shifeng's physical doppelgangers inherited the skill's effects. Now, every one of his doppelgangers had the strength to rival Grand Lords of the same level. If 8 level 100 Grand Lords worked together, they could even take on a level 100 Mythic monster. However, before Shifeng could control his doppelgangers, Urdia vanished, reappearing before Shifeng's clones. The heroic spirit brandished his flaming greatsword, sending 8 crimson sword lights at all 8 doppelgangers. Shifeng's doppelgangers reacted quickly, intercepting the attacks with their swords. However, the moment the crimson sword lights met the doppelgangers' blades, the impact threw them over a dozen yards before they slammed into the ground, their swords humming. Each doppelganger instantly lost over 20,000 HP. A bronze combat technique? Shifeng's expression turned grim when he saw the outcome. Extreme Slash. Although Urdia had only executed 8 extreme slashes, one fewer than Miracle Dragon's 9 extreme slashes, Urdia's mastery with the technique was far greater than Miracle Dragon's. He had mastered the advanced combat technique until he had upgraded it into a bronze combat technique. This was a Tier 3 heroic spirit that could use bronze combat techniques. No one would have believed Shifeng if he had told them about Urdia's abilities in his previous life. Some might even mock him for his stupidity. Heroic spirits might have once been heroes, but they weren't anymore. They particularly lacked intellect and weren't even a match for ordinary NPCs regarding this aspect. Seeing a heroic spirit execute an advanced combat technique was already quite impressive. Most Tier 3 NPCs couldn't even master a bronze combat technique, much less a Tier 3 heroic spirit. And yet, the impossible had just happened. After repelling the 8 doppelgangers, Urdia shifted his gaze to Shifeng's main body. He executed Flame Charge, transforming into a fiery meteor as he flew toward the swordsman. Based on how this Flame Charge appeared, Urdia's skill completion rate should be 99% or 100%. Shifeng didn't dare take Urdia's charge head-on. If the heroic spirit had already thrown his doppelgangers, he could definitely send Shifeng flying. Shifeng activated Phantom Kill, summoning another doppelganger and having it activate Blade Liberation Defensive Blade to intercept the approaching Berserker King. If he died during his Tier 3 promotion quest, he'd have to wait a long time before he could challenge it again. It was a risk he wasn't willing to take. However, the moment Shifeng's doppelganger activated Defensive Blade, Urdia cancelled his flame charge and thrust his flaming greatsword into the ground. Dozens of fiery blades rose from the dirt, flying toward the doppelganger. Tier 3 skill, Storm Garrote. Defensive Blade's block counts were exhausted in an instant. Seeing this, Shifeng had no choice but to focus most of his attention on his doppelganger and executed Sword's Orbit. When the galaxy of stars and the flaming blades met, both attacks shattered. Although the doppelganger had successfully blocked the attacks, it had been forced to stumble over a dozen steps backward. Moreover, each attack had devoured nearly 10,000 of the doppelganger's HP. With just one skill, Urdia had dealt over -200,000 damage. As they kept the forgotten spirits away from the gravesite, the Abyssal Blade Phantom's duration continued to decrease, and Shifeng's doppelganger couldn't keep Urdia distracted. It began to make Shifeng even more nervous. If he activated twofold Berserk, he could hold Urdia off, but he needed to activate the grave with his main body. There was no point in trying to distract the heroic spirit himself. He intended to reserve absolute domain for his escape from this place. Even if he activated the grave and obtained the legacy contained within, he would fail his quest without it. Your doppelgangers are quite good, but this is as far as you'll get, Urdia declared, chuckling when he realized Shifeng's doppelganger had survived his Storm Garrote. Urdia pulled his greatsword from the ground and appeared before the doppelganger. He executed 8 extreme slashes once more, but this time, he concentrated all 8 attacks on a single target. Dragon Soul. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shifeng understood that if his doppelganger died, this quest would come to an end. Hence, he decided to use the Abyssal Blade's strongest skill, Dragon Soul. Right now, every attribute point mattered. Shifeng's doppelganger roared, the sound filling the entire forest. As it did, the doppelganger transformed into a 10-meter-tall, pitch-black dragon. It had more than doubled in size than when the abyssal blade had only been a Tier 2 weapon. Seeing the 8 sword lights fly toward it, Shifeng's doppelganger swiped a single claw to block them all. Boom! The sword lights slammed into the doppelganger's claw, and an intense shockwave shook the forest, only fading after extending 100 yards away. A spatial tear had even appeared before the dragon's claw, and the doppelganger only stumbled a step back. Chapter 2309, Blade Saint Legacy secured so strong. Shifeng was surprised to see his doppelganger only lose a little over 5,000 HP after receiving Urdia's 8 extreme slashes. Although his doppelganger had already been quite powerful with Dragon Soul active, nearly invincible among beings of the same tier, it had grown even stronger, especially its strength and defense. In these two attributes, his doppelganger could practically rival Tier 4 mythic monsters. Moreover, the size of the black dragon's body afforded Shifeng plenty of advantages. Before the black dragon's 10-meter-tall frame, Urdia looked like little more than a small animal. The doppelganger wouldn't have any issue stopping the heroic spirit's attacks. However, Urdia didn't pause after his attack failed. He immediately appeared before the black dragon's head, his flaming greatsword transforming into a colossal pillar of fire. Tier 3 Taboo Skill, Burning Sword. When the fire pillar completed its transformation, it stretched across 100 yards. The black dragon looked tiny before the flaming weapon, and Urdia swung it down on the doppelganger. Not even Shifeng could escape the pillar's range, much less the black dragon. Don't think I'm so easy to kill. As the fire pillar descended, Shifeng had his black dragon use Dragon Breath. Unlike the Dragon Breath skill from his Heavenly Dragon's Breath Ring, the black dragon's ability was the real deal. According to legend, a Tier 5 Dragon Breath could vaporize an entire city instantly. The true Dragon Breath was easily more powerful than any taboo skill or curse, essentially rivaling divine arts. The black dragon opened its maw, and a horrific amount of mana concentrated between its jaws. In the blink of an eye, a pitch-black energy ball as large as a small house had taken shape, and as the black dragon released a deafening roar, the energy ball reformed as a pillar of pitch-black light, firing toward the heroic spirit's pillar of fire. Boom! The dragon breath and burning sword slammed into each other, creating a shockwave that shook their surroundings and didn't dissipate until it had spread 500 yards away. At the point of impact, space had crumbled, forming a black hole. It felt as if Armageddon had begun. Sure enough, the true dragon breath is far more powerful. Shifeng could not help but be astonished when he saw Urdia being sent flying. Shifeng had only hoped that the black dragon would stop Urdia's killing move. He hadn't actually expected the doppelganger to win that exchange, dealing over -30,000 damage to the heroic spirit. Urdia wasn't in danger of dying after losing 30,000 HP, but it was enough damage for the black dragon to hold the heroic spirit's aggro. Now, Urdia's focus had turned away from Shifeng's main body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Shifeng charged at the gravestone. System, do you wish to activate the grave and absorb a portion of the grave owner's legacy? Without any hesitation, Shifeng activated the grave the moment the prompt window appeared. Like the previous grave, a loading bar appeared when he activated. However, this loading bar required 12 seconds, rather than the 8 seconds the previous grave had required. Shifeng celebrated the fact that he had decided to keep absolute defense in reserve. Had he used the skill to stop Urdia, rather than rely on Dragon Soul, he would have died halfway through the activation process. Unfortunately, the instant Shifeng activated the grave, Urdia went berserk. Ignoring the black dragon, the heroic spirit dashed toward Shifeng. Only a little over 100 yards separated Urdia and Shifeng, and a titled, Tier 3 heroic spirit would only need a few steps to cross that distance. However, the black dragon intercepted Urdia near the halfway mark, using its massive frame to keep the heroic spirit away from Shifeng. The black dragon then swiped a claw at its foe. The black dragon's claw was the size of a car, and although Urdia sensed the incoming attack, he couldn't dodge it in time, relying on his greatsword to block it. As the claw slid along the massive blade, dazzling sparks flew from the weapon. Urdia knocked away the black dragon's claw with his greatsword. Now, he fully displayed the strength of a Tier 3 heroic spirit. Even a Tier 2 dragon would find him a difficult opponent. Fortunately, there wasn't a particularly large difference between the two combatants' basic attributes. Although the heroic spirit had knocked away the black dragon's claw, the dragon steadily remained in its original position. It had only taken a little over -2,000 damage from the clash. The black dragon had tens of millions of HP, so this amount of damage was nothing. Realizing this, Urdia stopped relying on brute force to break past the black dragon. Instead, he executed a combat technique, transforming into 7 phantoms that charged at Shifeng's main body. Advanced combat technique, flowing shadow. The 7 phantoms looked and felt exactly the same, not even Shifeng could tell the difference. But he wasn't ready to give up just yet. In response, he executed lightning slash through his black dragon. As a bronze combat technique, Shifeng even had trouble executing lightning flash with his main body, not to mention with a doppelganger, but the black dragon's physique was far superior to his, so Shifeng barely managed to pull it off. 14 claw strikes then plowed into the 7 phantoms. Pung! 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 Metallic clangs echoed through the cemetery as Urdia blocked all 14 strikes. The black dragon lost over 30,000 HP and stumbled a step back, but it had achieved its goal and stopped Urdia's advance. Only, Shifeng had paled from the effort of executing lightning flash with the black dragon. It consumed so much concentration. Shifeng could feel a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He had expended significantly more concentration when executing the bronze combat technique through the black dragon than when he used the technique himself. Of course, Urdia hadn't given up. He executed flowing shadow again, trying to reach Shifeng. With no other options, Shifeng continued to rely on lightning flash to stop Urdia. 2 times. 3 times. 4 times. Every time Shifeng executed lightning flash, a considerable portion of his concentration slipped away. By the time he executed the technique for the 6th time, he felt mentally lethargic. However, he still needed 5 more seconds to complete the activation process. By the time Shifeng executed lightning flash a 9th time, his complexion was as white as paper. He felt a stinging pain in his head, and the world seemed to spin around him. Now, he couldn't even control the abyssal blade phantoms to stop the swarming undead. A large number of forgotten spirits flew toward Shifeng, and Urdia circled the black dragon, appearing before Shifeng's main body. The heroic spirit swung his flaming greatsword down on the swordsman. 8 extreme slashes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. 8 massive sword lights appeared and threatened to devour Shifeng completely. When the 8 sword lights were only an inch away from him, Shifeng gritted his teeth and activated Absolute Domain. Golden, divine runes immediately began to appear on his body. As the 8 sword lights crossed that final inch, they came to an abrupt halt against the divine runes, unable to touch Shifeng. With Absolute Domain's protection, neither Urdia or the Forgotten Spirits could harm Shifeng. Needless to say, they couldn't stop Shifeng from activating the grave either. System, Legacy Completion Rate 85%. Do you wish to accept this legacy? Chapter 23:10, Urdia vs. Anna. As soon as he saw the system notification, Shifeng accepted the legacy. He didn't know how good a legacy with an 85% completion rate would be, but it was undoubtedly better than the 15% legacy he had found earlier. After Shifeng accepted the legacy, countless divine runes began to flow from the grave toward him, forming a glowing imprint on the back of his hand. Suddenly, Shifeng bore the mark of a purple-gold sword. The moment the mark formed, Urdia descended into madness. His muscles bulged, and a cloak of fire enveloped his frame. The temperature around him soared, and the flaming cloak burned the earth under his feet to black ash. If Shifeng hadn't activated Absolute Domain, he'd likely lose astonishing amounts of HP due to his proximity to the heroic spirit. With Urdia going into full berserk mode and his absolute domain's duration almost up, Shifeng switched the 7 luminaries rings aura of earth to the aura of wind and activated Gale domain to make a hasty retreat. While all forms of teleportation were prohibited in the Voidland's inner area, flying, fortunately, was not. Gale domain was Shifeng's only hope of escaping from the inner area. Without it, he wouldn't have any chance of leaving the inner region even if he had the legacy. He no longer had 9 dragons to rely on, and he had a titled, Tier 3 heroic spirit after him. However, before Shifeng could leave the grave, Urdia charged forth like a meteor. The heroic spirit was so fast that not even the black dragon could stop him in time. Boom! Urdia crashed into Shifeng, and the golden, divine runes that protected him actually trembled. This hadn't even happened when Urdia had hacked and slashed at Shifeng earlier. The heroic spirit proceeded to brandish his flaming greatsword at Shifeng, over and over. For a moment, even Shifeng was helpless against the countless sword lights. He couldn't keep up with the speed of any of these attacks. Urdia's attack speed wasn't that much faster than his, but he couldn't keep up with the heroic spirit's reaction speed. With Urdia's basic attributes, the heroic spirit could finish Shifeng off in 2 or 3 hits, even if Shifeng activated twofold berserk. Absolute domain only had 6 seconds remaining, and Shifeng was still nearly 1,500 yards away from the inner region's barrier. Throwing caution to the wind, he flew straight for the barrier. Despite the fact that Urdia couldn't fly, the undead had no issues keeping up with Shifeng, continuously attacking the fleeing swordsman. Every one of Urdia's attacks had enough power to injure mythic monsters. Shifeng would have already died several times if it hadn't been for Absolute Domain's protection. 5 seconds. 3 seconds. 1 second. Unfortunately, Shifeng's flying speed was fast, but he couldn't reach the barrier within 6 seconds. He was still roughly 500 yards from his target when Absolute Domain's effects wore off. As soon as they did, Shifeng felt a scorching heat envelop his body, dealing minus 10,000 damage per second. Seeing the divine runes fade from Shifeng's body, Urdia sneered at his prey. He pushed off the ground and arrived before Shifeng in an instant, plunging his flaming greatsword down on Shifeng's head. 8 extreme slashes. This time, every one of the 8 sword lights contained Tier 4 power. Not even the black dragon would be strong enough to block the attack, much less Shifeng. Fortunately, Shifeng had prepared for this moment and activated Defensive Blade. Pung! 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 Another series of metallic clangs echoed throughout the forest. Urdia had exhausted over half of Defensive Blade's block counts in that one exchange. By the time Defensive Blade ended, Shifeng had only moved 50 yards closer to the barrier. As Urdia was about to launch another attack, Shifeng activated Abyssal Bind. Over 20 pitch-black chains emerged from the void, binding Urdia and forcing the heroic spirit to a grinding halt. At Tier 3, Abyssal Bind could hold a target for up to 5 seconds, and it should be 100% effective against a Tier 3 being like Urdia. It was also Shifeng's final trump card. Pung! However, before Shifeng could relax, he heard the sound of a chain shattering. When he had gone berserk, Urdia had become nearly stronger than a mythic monster. It had only taken the heroic spirit an instant to shatter one of the chains. As if they were made of paper, the other chains began to break, one after another. For the crime of desecrating a saint's grave, you will die. Urdia bellowed as he swung his freed arms, slashing his greatsword at Shifeng, who stood over 50 yards away. As Urdia swung his greatsword, a torrent of fire swept toward Shifeng. Shifeng spun, meeting the attack with his swords as the flames were about to hit him. Void Shield. Boom! The Void Shield, which had 10 times Shifeng's maximum HP, nearly shattered as a result of the attack, and the impact threw Shifeng backward over 30 yards. What a frightening move. Shifeng silently celebrated when he saw that his Void Shield had only cracked. If he hadn't responded appropriately, that attack would have killed him. Urdia was far more powerful than Shifeng had imagined. Had he allowed his strength and greed to blind him, challenging the largest grave instead, he would have died the moment his absolute domain's duration ended. Meanwhile, thanks to Urdia's attack, Shifeng and the heroic spirit were now separated by 100 yards. Although Abyssal Bind wouldn't hold down Urdia for 5 seconds, it should be able to keep him in place for 2. Fortunately, as a Tier 3 heroic spirit, Urdia couldn't attack a target that was so far away. In the remaining 2 seconds, Shifeng widened the gap between him and his pursuer by more than 300 yards. Urdia's movement speed was much higher than Shifeng's, but during a chance, Urdia would need some time to get within attack range. Meanwhile, Shifeng continued to move closer to the barrier. 150 yards. 100 yards. 50 yards. When Urdia was less than 80 yards away from Shifeng and was about to bombard the fleeing swordsman once more, Shifeng finally slipped through the magic barrier. Enraged, Urdia sent another wave of fire at Shifeng, but this time, Shifeng retrieved a summon guard scroll and called forth Anna. As Anna appeared before him, Shifeng breathed a sigh of relief. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He might not be a match for a titled, Tier 3 heroic spirit, but that wasn't the case for Anna. Anna was an epic guard with a 113-point growth potential. She might not rival an NPC hero of the same tier, but she wasn't far from it. She'd have no problems holding off Urdia. Calmly, Anna swung her staff and cast a spell in response to Urdia's fiery attack. A black-white, twofold magic array appeared before the personal guard. The moment Urdia's flames encountered the array, it looked like they had crashed into the side of a rocky mountain. No matter how much fire crashed into and burned the magic array, they didn't do any damage. All right. Let's leave. With Urdia chasing after him, even after he had crossed the inner region's magic barrier, Shifeng immediately activated the Tier 2 group instantaneous teleportation scroll he had pulled from his bag earlier, leaving the island with Anna by his side. Chapter 23:11, Mana Body Starmoon Kingdom, White River City. Once Shifeng and Anna had arrived in the Void Land safe zone, he used a return scroll and teleported back to White River City. However, he nearly thought he had arrived at the wrong place when he emerged from the teleportation array. Many of the players in the teleportation hall had already reached level 90, and there were quite a few level 91 players among the crowd. Not even Dragonheart Island's experts should have reached this level yet. He had only been busy with his Tier 3 promotion quest for a few days. The effects of the planar passages opening early are so drastic. The open planar passages was the only explanation Shifeng could think of. The planar passages activation wouldn't just lead to new players on the main continent, it would also bring in an abundance of resources, including leveling resources. During Shifeng's previous life, the planar passages activation had triggered a leveling frenzy among the main continent's players, but it had been nothing compared to this. However, after giving the matter some more thought, Shifeng knew such a situation wasn't impossible. His presence in God's domain had already caused a significant butterfly effect, and players in this life leveled much faster than in the past. With the planar passages activating before mainstream players had even reached level 100, the increased resources would have a greater effect on players. With so many excellent grinding spots available, it was only natural that players would level up faster than before. As Shifeng was about to leave the teleportation hall, a 100-man team of independent players walked into the building. Noticing the team's arrival, many players in the hall turned their attention to the newcomers, chatting quietly amongst themselves. Quick, look! It_S Silver Arrow. They must be heading out to raid another level 95 team dungeon. I wonder when our adventurer team will be ready to do the same. Your adventurer team? Dream on. Even the Black Dragon Empire's players are just starting to raid level 95 team dungeons, not to mention Starmoon Kingdom's players. Moreover, Silver Arrow was one of the first adventurer teams to join the Shadowless Adventurer Alliance, and it's received a lot of help from the Shadow Empire Adventurer Team, L. I guess you're right. But joining the Shadowless Adventurer Alliance is so difficult. I've heard that many of the well-known adventurer teams from the neighboring kingdoms have been rejected. That's right. The passing rate is incredibly low, but as long as an adventurer team becomes a member, it'll undergo a metamorphosis. Not only will its overall strength significantly increase, but not even first-rate guilds and superpowers experts would dare to mess with it. The various players discussing the Silver Arrow adventurer team did so in envy. Most of Silver Arrow's members had already reached level 92, which not even superpowers main force members had reached. The surrounding players were even more jealous when they saw the equipment Silver Arrow's members wore. Every member of the adventurer team had a full set of level 90 fine gold equipment. Although many expert players had climbed to level 90 or above due to the planar passages, very few had acquired level 90 weapons and equipment, much less top-tier items. With a full set of level 90 fine gold equipment, players would qualify to raid level 95 team dungeons. The Otherworld's adventurer alliances have already developed this far. Shifeng had to admit that he was a little surprised to see Silver Arrow's members. The Otherworld's adventurer teams had only begun to form adventurer alliances after the main continent's various powers had tried to invade these Otherworlds multiple times in the past. The adventurer alliances had then relied on independent players to contest for the level 100+ neutral maps on the main continent, at which point, many of the main continent's powers had begun to perish. Shifeng had never thought the butterfly effect would be so massive that Otherworld's powers would form adventurer alliances by this stage of the game. With this, these Otherworld powers would pose a much greater threat to the main continent's powers than they had during his previous life. After the commotion Silver Arrow's team had caused, Shifeng rushed out of the teleportation hall and made his way to the library. He had thought that he was far ahead of most players since he had reached level 100 and completed his Tier 3 promotion quest. He also had Kola and the others, who had already reached level 95 and beyond. They should reach level 100 soon. However, it seemed that the butterfly effect he had caused would be disastrous for him. If he couldn't quickly become a lord of a neutral map, as the various superpowers in the past had, both he and Zero Wing would vanish into history. Half an hour later, Shifeng arrived at the top floor of White River City's library. He found Charlene quietly reading an ancient tome from her throne at the far end of the Star Moon Hall. You really know how to surprise people. I thought you'd be stuck there for several months, Charlene said, smiling as she pulled her gaze from the book and looked at Shifeng. Are you really prepared to inherit your legacy? You only have one opportunity. Your performance will greatly affect your future. Yes, I'm ready. Shifeng nodded. The Tier 3 promotion quest consisted of 2 parts. Locating the lost legacy was the first part, and inheriting it was the second. The second part was also the most important of the promotion quest, in which one would change their body's mana framework. As a major turning point in God's domain, players' physiques and their body's mana framework would transform when they reached Tier 3. Of course, not all mana frameworks were equal. The difference in their strengths would even exist among players with ordinary Tier 3 classes. Players inherited a variety of legacies, and those with different mana frameworks would display varying levels of strength. However, these differences wouldn't display in a player's physique, but would affect the world's rules. For example, Tier 2 players could only survive for a short time in level 100+ neutral maps due to the area's environments, even if they just stood there and did nothing. In comparison, Tier 3 players could survive for a long time in a level 100+ neutral map due to their body's mana framework. The stronger a player's mana framework was, the greater their survivability would be in poor environments. Their mana framework would also largely impact their stamina and concentration recovery rates. This was why Tier 3 classes had such a huge impact in God's domain. Although Shifeng had already obtained his legacy, he wasn't out of the woods yet. His ability to inherit the legacy was far more important. Shifeng had only completed a Tier 3 bronze legacy in the past, and although the bronze legacy had been among the best of its peers, and he had formed a nearly perfect mana body, it hadn't been enough to get him through his Tier 4 promotion quest. Normally, only players with a silver-ranked mana body could survive in the harsh environments that served as the venue for Tier 4 promotion quests. As a result, he had always been a step away from clearing the quest in his previous life. Of course, if he had had a piece of legendary equipment back then, the results would have been different. Even a piece of fragmented legendary equipment would have changed the outcome significantly. Unfortunately, he never managed to find one, so he hadn't been able to cross that threshold. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Alright, this is your decision, but you must remember that your time is limited. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Charlene warned. Seeing how determined Shifeng was to see the rest of his promotion quest through, she began to chant the incantation. The sword mark on the back of Shifeng's right hand began to burn, and at the same time, countless divine runes appeared across his body, gradually forming a gigantic, fourfold magic array. 3 windows displaying mana body samples then appeared before him, each more complex than the last. Shifeng was ecstatic the moment he saw the magic array and sample mana bodies. The number of layers the magic array had, which would construct the mana body, represented the rank of the mana body that could be created. A single-layered magic array represented bronze rank, a 2-layered magic array represented silver rank, and so on. The mana body samples represented the complete mana body standard. The first sample represented the basic standard, the second represented the intermediate standard, and the third represented the advanced standard. However, the magic array that enveloped Shifeng now had 4 layers. He had never heard of a fourfold magic array creating a mana body before. Chapter 23:12 Advanced Epic. Once Charlene had formed the magic array, a series of system notification rang in Shifeng's ears. System, congratulations on completing your Tier 3 promotion quest and obtaining the Blade Saint Legacy. Legacy completion rate 85%. Advanced Epic Legacy received. You have 4 hours to construct your mana body. System, congratulations on being the first player to complete the Tier 3 promotion quest. You will have 1 additional hour to construct your mana body. Epic rank? Shifeng was stunned when he read the system notifications. The highest rank mana body he had heard of during his previous life had only been gold rank, and only 1 out of every 10,000 experts had earned a gold-ranked mana body during their Tier 3 promotion quests. These experts had been powerhouses in level 100+ neutral maps, strong enough to give the various superpowers massive headaches. A gold mana body provided more than high adaptability to harsh environments, it also elevated players' stamina and concentration recovery rates to extraordinary highs. Players' stamina and concentration would recover by absorbing the mana around them. Depending on the density of the mana in the area, their recovery rates would increase by 30% to 60%. With such a significant improvement to their stamina and concentration recovery rates, players would no longer have to rely on stamina equipment, replacing such items with equipment that provided more raw power. This was why players with gold mana bodies were so much stronger than ordinary experts and could freely roam in level 100+ neutral maps. Even superpowers would find these players quite challenging to hunt down. This was also why the various superpowers' influence on independent players would significantly decrease when they reached Tier 3, even to the extent that top adventurer teams could begin to contend with superpowers. The Midnight Tea Party was a prime example of this. After level 100, players had had an absurdly difficult time trying to join the Midnight Tea Party during Shifeng's previous life. Once the adventurer team's members had reached Tier 3, a gold-ranked mana body had become a requirement for joining the team. Even superpowers had been helpless against an entire group of experts with gold mana bodies in level 100+ neutral maps. And Shifeng hadn't even heard of an epic mana body. Moreover, he now had a total of 5 hours to construct his mana body. In the past, he had only had 1 hour to construct his bronze mana body, and players with gold mana bodies had only been given 2 hours. The process of constructing a mana body was mostly the same across the board. The outcome depended on how much one could complete in the allotted time, and one's progress depended on how much time they invested in the trials. You can begin your mana body's construction now. Remember, you only have 5 hours. If you fail to complete a mana body before time runs out, the magic array will grant you the most basic mana body available, and your efforts will have gone to waste, Charlene reminded Shifeng seriously. Understood. He nodded, understanding how important this matter was. Immediately, Shifeng carefully inspected the 3 mana body samples hovering before him. Each of the mana bodies displayed was different and more complicated than the last. The simplest of the 3 was several times more complex than the Peak Bronze Legacy's mana body he had obtained in the past. Not only did these samples involve magic arrays, but they also required divine runes and refined mana manipulation. Any ordinary player might be able to copy the mana body samples blindly, but their completion rate wouldn't be high. Naturally, a low completion rate would severely affect one's combat power. A player's mana body would affect their control with their skills and spells in the future. A poorly constructed mana body would result in low mana conductibility. This would limit players' ability to use Tier 3 skills and spells with a completion rate of 90% or higher, since players had to actively guide and control their mana during the process to amply their skills or spells' power. This was also why experts in Shifeng's previous life had preferred to aim for less complex mana bodies to ensure high completion rates, rather than aim for a more complex mana body with a low completion rate. If players constructed a perfect mana body, it wouldn't negatively affect their combat power, which would be a significant help when challenging their Tier 4 promotion quests in the future. Shifeng spent around 10 minutes inspecting the 3 mana body samples he had been given. Although the advanced mana body is extremely complex and even involves multi-line mana manipulation, I have 5 hours to play around with. I should give it a try. Having made his decision, Shifeng focused on the advanced mana body sample and began to manipulate the mana within him. There might not be a huge difference between an intermediate mana body's environmental adaptability and that of an advanced mana body, but the difference between the 2 options' recovery rates and defense was massive. Naturally, players' defense would undergo a considerable transformation when they reached Tier 3 and obtained their mana body. Their toughness as a Tier 2 player couldn't even compare. With a mana body, a layer of protective mana would envelop their frame, making them less prone to physical injury, which would reduce their combat power from ordinary attacks. Naturally, the higher the mana body's rank was, the stronger this protective layer would be. It would also help players recover from physical injuries much faster. Time flew by. After nearly 20 minutes, Shifeng had finally finished constructing his first mana body. Shifeng could feel himself grow much stronger the instant he completed his mana body. Now, the surrounding mana actively flowed into him, giving him a mentally refreshed feeling. System, mana body constructed. Completion rate 64%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? I barely passed. Sure enough, the advanced mana body isn't easy to construct. Shifeng gave the completion rate a bitter smile. But to think that this mana body is so powerful despite a 64% completion rate, an epic mana body, is really amazing. Normally, a mana body with a 60% completion rate was only considered passable. If one failed to achieve a passing completion rate in the designated time, they'd be stuck with the default mana body. With the default option, achieving a 90% completion rate with Tier 3 skills and spells would be practically impossible. Players typically needed a 75% completion rate mana body to ensure their skills and spells would remain unaffected. In the past, Shifeng had constructed his bronze mana body with a 95% completion rate. At that standard, a direct hit from a mysterious iron weapon had, at most, left a small scratch, hardly affecting his combat power. However, he didn't have much hope of achieving a 95% completion rate with his mana body in this life. An epic mana body was simply too complex. His only goal was to get an 80% completion rate to avoid any negative effects to his combat power. Even with an 80% completion rate with an epic mana body, only secret silver weapons and better would be capable of physically injuring him. Shifeng then started his second attempt. After the first attempt, he chose not to focus on speed. Rather, he took great care, slowly constructing the mana body. After more than half an hour, Shifeng had ended up with a 72% completion rate, just short of the 75% threshold. Shifeng invested a full hour for his third attempt, but he had only earned a 74% completion rate. What am I missing? He began to grow frustrated as he examined the advanced mana body sample again. He had already spent nearly half of his allotted time, yet he hadn't constructed an adequate advanced mana body. If he continued to waste time, he wouldn't even have enough time to attempt the intermediate mana body's construction. He had performed every step with great precision, yet he still only achieved a 74% completion rate. During his previous life, he hadn't been anywhere near the refinement realm standard, yet he had still managed a 95% completion rate with his mana body. However, even as a domain realm expert, he had only reached a 74% completion rate. It was unbelievable. No, that's not right. Shifeng suddenly snapped out of his daze. My mana manipulation hadn't been nearly as refined as it is now. I had glossed over some of the construction processes then, yet I still earned a 95% completion rate. This mana body sample is far more complex, but with my current standards, it shouldn't be this hard to achieve the same results. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Is my thirst for perfection having the opposite effect? Thinking up to this point, Shifeng began another attempt. This time, instead of trying to perfect all aspects of the construction process, he focused on certain parts, while glossing over the rest. This time, he completed the mana body in less than half an hour. The instant he completed his mana body, his 5 senses underwent a qualitative transformation. His affinity with the ambient mana skyrocketed. System, mana body constructed. Completion rate 91%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? Chapter 23:13, Prototype Domain. I succeeded? Shifeng was momentarily stunned when he heard the system notification. He had never considered that he'd achieve a 91% completion rate. An epic mana body was many times more complex than a bronze-ranked version, and even achieving a 90% with a silver mana body was immensely difficult. There were very few players in God's domain that were capable of achieving a 90% completion rate with a gold mana body. As far as Shifeng could remember, the player with the highest completion rate gold mana body had been Alice, the Witch of the West, in the past. She had managed to secure a peak gold mana body with a 98% completion rate. Of course, Alice was extraordinarily talented, which was why she had obtained such a high completion rate. Her manipulation of mana was simply godlike. Not even veteran domain realm experts could match her. Thanks to her powerful mana body, she had remained at the peak of God's domain even after becoming a Tier 6 mage god. The higher a mana body's completion rate, the more frighteningly powerful the mana body would be, especially for high-ranked mana bodies. Mana bodies might not provide any bonus basic attributes, but they offered significant increases to stamina and concentration recovery, defense, and self-healing capabilities. A gold mana body with a 98% completion rate could even reinforce players' control over their mana, allowing them to exhibit greater power with their skills and spells. Because of this, Alice had undergone a qualitative transformation after reaching Tier 3. Her mana manipulation had already been impressive, and after receiving the boons from her mana body, she had been able to achieve a 100% completion rate with practically all of her Tier 3 spells. Most peak experts had only been able to maintain a 90% completion rate with their Tier 3 spells after arduous training, yet Alice managed to level out at 100% in a very short time. After reaching a 90% completion rate with a Tier 3 spell, every additional percentage would significantly increase the spell's power. At 100% completion rate, a player's Tier 3 spell could even contend with the spells Tier 3 heroes used. It was easy to imagine how devastating these spells would be against players. Although Shifeng hadn't achieved a 98% completion rate, earning a 91% was beyond his expectations. I'll keep it. Snapping out of his daze, Shifeng promptly chose to keep his current mana body. There was no save option when constructing a mana body. If players gave up on a construction attempt, they'd have to start over. Hence, players had to have a clear goal in mind when constructing their mana body. Once they'd reached that goal, it would be wise to accept the mana body and avoid any further attempts. If one continued to seek a better outcome, they'd eventually run out of time and lose everything. Shifeng had seen many players make that mistake in his previous life. The endless pursuit of perfection was the reason that many expert players had been forced to delete their accounts and begin again. While players could set up a stronger foundation by starting a new account, they'd also lose out on many opportunities. Others would have already explored the low-level maps, leaving little for new players. When starting a new account, players weren't guaranteed to become as powerful as they had been with their old one. While part of the reason that Shifeng had achieved a 91% completion rate was his discovery of the correct thought process, luck was a larger part. He wasn't confident of repeating these results, and if he tried and earned an 89% completion rate, he'd just cry. There was a huge difference between a mana body with an 89% completion rate and one with a 90%. Mana bodies with a 75% completion rate or above wouldn't negatively affect players, and those with an 85% to 89% completion rate would receive a significant boost to their defense and stamina and concentration recovery. Mana bodies with a 90% to 94% completion rate, however, were considered top grade, and all of the aforementioned bonuses would be maxed out. If he had a high probability of achieving a 95% completion rate or above, another attempt might be worth the risk. A 93% or 94% completion rate wouldn't make much of a difference, after all. However, he'd be ruined if he earned a completion rate below 90%. After Shifeng accepted the mana body, the magic array around him flashed with a blinding light, and a horrific amount of mana gathered rapidly before flowing into him. As the torrent of mana filled him, Shifeng felt like his body had been set on fire. The burning sensation was far more intense than it had been with his peak bronze mana body. But as his advanced epic mana body began to take shape, Shifeng's perception of the world around him grew sharper. After 6 seconds, magic circuits began to surface across Shifeng's body, and the ambient mana steadily gathered within him. Although the magic circuits faded away 2 seconds later, the mana didn't stop flowing into him. System, congratulations. You have become a Tier 3 Blade Saint and obtained an advanced epic mana body. All basic attributes plus 400, all resistance plus 80, attack power and attack speed increased by 30%, all basic attributes increased by 60%, and physique increased by 70%. Rewarding 80 legacy skill points. Finally, I got my body back. Shifeng was ecstatic as he felt the new changes. Tier 3. He had spent nearly a decade as a Tier 3 player during his previous life, so he was most familiar with this tier. Now that he had recovered to his peak, he could finally exhibit his true combat power. While Shifeng basked in the familiar strength, he noticed that his perception had become drastically sharper than before. He could even sense the flow of mana in the air. A prototype domain? The sensation astonished Shifeng. Is this an advanced epic mana body's ability? Previously, he'd only been able to perceive such details within a 30-yard radius around him by relying on his 5 senses. Now, however, his perception had extended to 50 yards away. Moreover, he felt like an absolute overlord within the 50-yard radius. Of course, he didn't actually have control over this area. He only had rudimentary control of the ambient mana. Even so, this was a prototype domain. A domain operated on the principle of controlling the mana in a specific area to create a miniature world that favored the player. Although he couldn't suppress his enemies with a prototype domain, he could manipulate the ambient mana and reduce the mana density where his enemies stood. The decreased density wouldn't affect players' basic attributes, but it would impact their concentration in battle. Such an ability would definitely grant him an edge in combat. Moreover, he could sense that his stamina and concentration recovery rates had improved by at least 70% due to his new mana body. He had also become tough enough that not even full-powered attacks from a secret silver weapon could easily injure him. In other words, if a player wielding a secret silver weapon struck the unprotected parts of his body, their damage would be reduced to the lowest possible value as if they had struck a piece of armor. Now that he had obtained his mana body, Shifeng opened his legacy skill menu to check for new skills. There were over 20 Tier 3 skills available, and every one of them required at least 20 legacy skill points to learn. Some of the more powerful skills even required 50 points. Players that had failed to collect legacy skill points from unconventional means would be fortunate to learn 2 Tier 3 skills upon reaching Tier 3. Fortunately, that wasn't the case for Shifeng. With the points he had saved up thus far and the points he just obtained, he had nearly 100 legacy skill points to spend. Shifeng immediately spent 40 legacy skill points to upgrade Blade Liberation and Blade Awakening to Tier 3. He then spent another 50 points to learn Void Slash, the strongest skill a Tier 3 Blade Saint could learn. Void Slash, action type, requires Sword Tier 3, proficiency needed to upgrade to Tier 4, 0/100,000, manipulate the power of the void to execute 6 slashes. Each slash carries 150% of user's strength and causes 200% divine damage. User may transfer to the location of any of the 6 slashes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU cooldown, 8 seconds. Not only did Tier 3 skills possess greater raw power than Tier 2 skills, but they were also more capable of injuring high-tiered monsters. However, Tier 3 skills had very long cooldowns. Those with immense power and short cooldowns, like Void Slash, were exceptionally rare. Normally, players tried to learn several Tier 3 skills and link them together to make up for the long cooldowns. However, with Void Slash alone, Shifeng could exhibit nearly the full potential DPS of a Tier 3 player. Now that I've reached Tier 3, it's time I lead everyone to a level 100 neutral map. With his new strength, Shifeng was confident that he could eliminate a level 100 Great Lord, even without Anna and Kite's help. Chapter 23:14, Tier 3 Powerhouse. When Shifeng left the library, he made his way toward the Adventurers Association. Although he was now officially a Tier 3 player, he still needed to register his achievement at the Adventurers Association to gain the appropriate certification. Gaining Tier 3 certification at the Adventurers Association was very important. Not only would it allow players to accept high-ranked quests appropriate for their tier, but they would also be acknowledged as true powerhouses in God's domain. They would then qualify to raid the monarch bosses in neutral maps and become the area's ruler. This was also why the various powers had been so desperate to get their members to Tier 3 in the past. The Tier 3 turning point didn't simply differentiate experts from each other. It also determined whether or not one qualified to become a true overlord. After all, the various powers' true battlefield for hegemony in God's domain was in level 100+ neutral maps. Initially, Shifeng had planned to establish a guild town in a level 100 neutral map and steadily progressing towards lordship, but now that the planar passages had opened, and adventurer alliances had formed sooner than he had expected, he needed a more efficient plan. The planar passages activation hadn't just accelerated independent players' leveling speed. It had done so for the various powers, as well. Now, he didn't have as much time to conquer level 100+ neutral maps. Zero Wing wasn't like the various superpowers. It lacked the manpower and resources to secure a foundation in level 100 neutral maps as quickly as superpowers could. Moreover, Zero Wing wouldn't be able to secure as much territory as the various superpowers. To establish a guild town in a level 100 neutral map, the ruling power would need to station a large number of players in the map long-term. Level 100 neutral maps were very far away from kingdoms and empires, considered free zones that were outside of any kingdom or empire's protection. In addition, NPCs weren't particularly interested in visiting these guild towns due to the neutral map's harsh environments. As a result, very few NPCs would apply as soldiers, and those that did would ask for exorbitant salaries. Hence, unlike in guild towns within kingdoms, empires, and low-level neutral maps, players had to handle the majority of their guild town's defenses in level 100 neutral maps. This was also why guilds that wanted to secure a foothold in level 100+ neutral maps needed to upgrade their towns into guild cities as quickly as possible. They'd only be able to solidify their rule over the map with a guild city. After all, not only would guilds have to face monster assaults, but they'd also have to deal with enemy powers. Why don't we capture a few more fortresses, guild leader? Zero Wing now had quite a bit of manpower in the Gravity Mountain range. With Phoenix Rain's subordinates protecting the northern fortress, they had enough strength to capture the other fortresses. The Gravity Mountain Range only had so many fortresses. If they captured a few more, they should be able to maintain 70% to 80% of their profits, even if the northern fortress's income decreased. Let the other powers fight for the fortresses. We only need the northern fortress, Shi Feng said, chuckling. Also, notify all of the main force members to gather in White River City. We'll be heading to a level 100 neutral map. That's where we really need to be right now. The Gravity Mountain Range was an excellent place for players to grind for levels and resources right now, but it couldn't help players rise to prominence. A level 100 neutral map. Blackie's eyes glowed when he heard Shi Feng's plan. All right. I'll notify them right away. The Gravity Mountain Range had bountiful resources, but it paled in comparison to unexplored level 100 neutral maps. Moreover, Zero Wing's main force members would benefit more from grinding in level 100 neutral maps at their levels than they would from grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range. After disconnecting the call, Blackie began to gather Zero Wing's main force members and head toward White River City. Meanwhile, Shi Feng arrived at the Adventurers Association. The Adventurers Association was quite lively at the moment, with just as many visiting players as the city's auction house. The auction house wasn't the only construction that transformed after White River City's promotion. The Adventurers Association had similarly undergone a metamorphosis and now contained a lot more NPCs who visited to consign quests. Some of these quests included those in high-level neutral maps and escort quests to the kingdom's borders. If one were lucky, they might even find crusade quests to slay monsters in neutral maps. With the opportunity to earn both equipment and money available, the Adventurers Association had become a hub for many independent players. As Shi Feng entered the first-floor hall, he was greeted by the sight of a ton of level 90-plus players. Now, not even the Adventurers Associations in imperial capitals could compare to the prosperity the association in White River City enjoyed. Pushing his way through the crowd, Shi Feng quickly made his way to the second-floor hall and applied for his certification as a Tier 3 adventurer. After completing the process in a VIP reception room, the Adventurers Association officially recognized Shi Feng as a Tier 3 powerhouse. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, Lord Bronze Legatee, is there anything else I can help you with today? The elven woman who had received him asked, smiling. I wish to see the Monarch Crusade quests for Cold Spring Forest, Shi Feng declared. Cold Spring Forest was the closest level 100 neutral map to Star Moon Kingdom, and it was one of the few level 100 maps with a relatively comfortable environment. Many Tier 2 players had grinded in the Cold Spring Forest after reaching level 100 in the past, including Shi Feng himself. However, the various superpowers had taken control of the map's 6 regions by the time he had reached Tier 3. Now that he was the first Tier 3 player in the game, he couldn't miss this opportunity. Are you sure you wish to accept this quest, Lord Bronze Legatee? We only have one transfer stone connected to the Ice Dragon's lair left. If you fail this quest, you will not be able to accept it again in the future, the Elven Administrator warned when Shi Feng selected the Crusade quest that had remained untouched for over a century. I'll take it, Shi Feng said with determination. He'd have a high chance of success with hunting the other monarchs thanks to his memories, but the Cold Spring Canyon was simply too valuable to give up. Technically, he could hunt one of the other 6 monarchs first and raid the Ice Dragon after the 10-day wait, but covering one area would be quite taxing on the guild with Zero Wing's current standards. Zero Wing simply couldn't manage 2 areas. Since he was limited to a single area, he had to choose the best option available. Even if he failed, he could prevent another power from obtaining the Cold Spring Canyon. The cost to teleport to Heathwaite's lair is quite high. You will have to pay 10,000 gold and 20,000 magic crystals as a deposit. If you complete the quest, we will return the deposit in full, as well as pay you your deserved remuneration. If you fail, however, your deposit will be forfeit, the Elven Administrator said seriously. That's fine. Shi Feng had already prepared for this cost. He handed the Elven Administrator the deposit in exchange for a gray, white crystal. This crystal was none other than the transfer stone for the Ice Dragon's lair. After obtaining the transfer stone, Shifeng made his way to the candlelight trading firm to retrieve some of the dark gold weapons that had been stored there. He then upgraded the abyssal blade to level 90, which was as high as he could upgrade the magic weapon right now. Level 95 weapons were still considered a luxury, not to mention level 95 dark gold weapons. Fortunately, the abyssal blade's attack power and attributes were only slightly lower than those of a level 100 epic weapon, despite the fact that it was only a level 90 magic weapon. The abyssal blade would be more than enough for Shifeng's needs. Shifeng then visited the candlelight trading firm's second basement floor, which was where he stored his most important items. A guild residence was quite secure, but the candlelight trading firm in White River City was many times safer than Zero Wings Guild Hall. At this point, only Tier 4 players would have any hope of breaking past the shop's defenses. At this moment, an NPC guard stood before the warehouse on the second basement floor. He was a level 100, Tier 3 fine gold guard, and unless one had permission, not even a Tier 3 Apex expert would get past him. The candlelight trading firm's defenses were impressively strict. With the help of the Grandmaster Forger Celiora, Shifeng had previously recast the disintegration armor, a piece of legendary equipment, yet despite being unfinished, it was too powerful for Shifeng to use. Moreover, carrying the disintegration armor on him wasn't safe, so he had stored it in the candlelight trading firm's underground warehouse. First, he didn't want to risk losing it, even if the chance of it dropping upon his death was negligible. Second, even after recasting it, the disintegration armor's aura would still attract ores, especially powerful, high-tiered ores. If he had attracted a powerful ore's attention as a Tier 2 player, he would have been helpless. Furthermore, he couldn't equip it yet. He had coveted legendary items for a long time. He had heard countless stories of players who owned a legendary item in his previous life. There were tales of Tier 4 players defeating Tier 5 players and Tier 5 players slaying Tier 6 god-ranked players. One player had even soloed a Tier 5 dragon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yet, the piece of legendary equipment he had gone to great lengths to obtain was an unfinished product, and its minimum use requirement was Tier 3. To make matters worse, he hadn't even been able to inspect its attribute panel until he had reached Tier 3. Holding on to the disintegration armor would have only frustrated him. Now that he had finally reached Tier 3 and met the minimum requirements to equip the disintegration armor, it was time to retrieve it. With a piece of legendary equipment, defeating the Ice Dragon, Heathwaite, would be far easier. Legendary items could, after all, allow players to transcend tiers, and as a Tier 3 player, he should be able to contend with a Tier 4 Ice Dragon with the disintegration armor equipped. Once he entered the warehouse and arrived before the disintegration armor, Shifeng chanted an incantation to release the seal protecting it. As soon as the seal faded, crimson energy pulsed away from the pitch-black chest piece, spreading. A pressure that would even make Tier 2 experts uncomfortable began to fill the warehouse. As the disintegration armor's aura swept over him, Shifeng felt his blood begin to boil as bloodlust wormed its way into his mind. Taking several seconds to suppress the maddening feeling, Shifeng tapped on the disintegration armor to inspect its attribute panel. Chapter 23:16, Armor of Legend. Space itself faintly began to crumble as it was exposed to the disintegration armor's disintegration power. Despite having reached Tier 3, the moment Shifeng touched the armor, he could feel the mana in his right arm vibrate and felt signs of it beginning to break down. Mana dispersal? The sensation in Shifeng's right arm stunned him. He hadn't had a particularly clear idea of what the disintegration armor had done to him when he had been Tier 2. He had only felt a strong, stifling pressure from the armor. Now that he was Tier 3, however, he could sense the disintegration power blocking and destroying the mana within him. After a slight touch, the mana density in his right arm had significantly decreased. If he maintained contact with the disintegration armor for a long period, it would utterly destroy the mana that coated his body. Losing this mana coating didn't seem like a major problem, but it would deal a fatal blow to Tier 3 players and above. After reaching Tier 3, a player's mana body would drive every action they took in God's domain. If their mana body couldn't conduct mana, they'd be as good as crippled. The mana body played a crucial role when players used Tier 3 skills and spells. Without a working mana body, activating those abilities would be nearly impossible. Naturally, the difference between the combat power a Tier 3 player could display with Tier 3 skills and spells and a Tier 3 player, who couldn't, would be obvious at a glance. Once Shurfeng had tapped on the Disintegration Armor, its attribute panel appeared before him. Disintegration Armor, Unfinished Product, Chest Plate, Legendary Rank, Equipment Requirement, Strength 9000, Agility 7000 Tier Requirement, Tier 3 Divine Defense plus 15,000, affected by player's level. All basic attributes plus 1000, affected by player's level and tier. Physique increased by 100%, affected by player's tier. When equipped, Strength increased by 120%, Agility increased by 100%, and Endurance increased by 100%, all resistance plus 300, magic resistance increased by 40%, mana body's effects increased by 50%, ignore levels plus 30, all item level requirements reduced by 10 levels. Additional passive skill, Disintegration Body, reduces the damage from Tier 3 or below attacks by 70%, reduces damage from Tier 4 or above attacks by 40%, immune to all control effects, weakens stiffening effects by 70%, and increases reaction speed by 20%. Additional active skill 1, Disintegration Field, disintegrates all skills and spells within a 100-yard radius. Skills and spells at Tier 2 and below will be nullified, while skills and spells above Tier 2 will be weakened by 60%. All entities within range will suffer a 40% reduction to basic attributes, physique, and stamina, in addition to a 400% increase to their stamina and concentration consumption rates. No cooldown. Additional active skill 2, Disintegration Power, gathers all of the Disintegration Armor's power and temporarily sacrifice all of its attributes to upgrade user by 1 tier for 60 seconds. Cooldown, 12 hours, cannot be stacked with skills and spells of similar effect. The Disintegration Armor is a divine armor that the Ur Empire's founding emperor had created with various divine items. This armor had been destroyed during a battle against gods. The Disintegration Armor has recovered a portion of its original strength after Celiura recast the chest piece using a blood contract. Due to the armor's disintegration power, the armor's attributes suffer an 80% reduction when equipped. If equipped by the blood contractor, the armor's attributes will only be reduced by 50%. God crystals required to repair the Disintegration Armor fully, 0/10. Amazing. Shurfeng's eyes glowed as he read the Disintegration Armor's attribute panel. Before this, he hadn't had a clear idea of what a true legendary item's attributes would look like. He had only heard of legendary items during his previous life. He hadn't actually seen a real legendary item's attribute panel since anyone with such an item had rightfully kept a tight lid on its abilities. Although the Disintegration Armor was an unfinished product, it was the strongest piece of equipment he had ever laid eyes on. Even Gentle Snow's fragmented legendary ranked 7 Luminaries battle armor was far weaker than this chest piece. The 7 Luminaries battle armor had originally been a legendary item, but after taking significant damage, its rank had fallen. And yet, despite being a damaged piece of armor as well, the Disintegration Armor was leagues stronger than the 7 Luminaries battle armor in all aspects. The fact that the Disintegration Armor granted divine defense, rather than a simple boost to ordinary defense, was particularly astounding. This meant that even skills and spells that dealt true damage wouldn't be as effective against the Disintegration Armor's wearer. It would also reduce lower-tiered players' damage, and higher-tiered players wouldn't be able to deal any additional damage due to their tier advantage. Divine Defense was the highest grade of defense in God's domain. It's a pity that the armor is so badly damaged. Even if I equip it, I'll only exhibit a fraction of its true might. If I could display the Disintegration Armor's full power, dealing with the Ice Dragon would be a piece of cake, Shurfeng thought. The Disintegration Power's instability limited the armor's true strength. At the armor's peak, Shifeng could likely defeat the Mythic ranked Ice Dragon head-on with the additional 100% physique and 120% strength. Even so, Shifeng was overjoyed that he could finally equip the disintegration armor. A piece of legendary equipment. Countless players, including Apex experts, dreamed of equipping such an item. Legendary items were simply too rare in God's domain. Just obtaining a single clue that might lead to one required an astronomical amount of manpower and resources. In some cases, these clues would only lead to a fragment of a legendary item. Players would then have to find the remaining fragments and invest even more resources to repair it. Unless one were ridiculously lucky or had particularly powerful support, getting their hands on a legendary item would be utterly impossible. Now, Shifeng finally had a legendary item of his own, and he could even equip it now. The disintegration armor's attributes might be halved, but it was still slightly more powerful than a piece of fragmented legendary equipment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shifeng immediately equipped the disintegration armor. The 9,000 strength and 7,000 agility were incredibly difficult requirements to meet. Even a tier 3 player in full, top-tier equipment would have to wait until level 120 to fulfill them, but it wasn't an issue for Shifeng. Not only did he have an advanced bloodline, but he also wielded one of the 10 great saint legacies. Furthermore, he carried a magic weapon and multiple fragmented legendary items. Meeting the two requirements at level 100 was actually quite easy for him. The instant Shifeng equipped the disintegration armor, he felt power course through him. His basic attributes skyrocketed, and his perception considerably improved. Even his mind felt far clearer than before. If he fought Urdia, a titled, tier 3 heroic spirit, in his current condition, he'd have a high chance of defeating the undead. It's about time to leave. Glancing at the time, Shifeng realized it was time to meet up with Blackie and the others. He activated the Nightwalker's Cape's Nightwalker skill to conceal the disintegration armor's aura and information before heading toward White River City's teleportation hall. Chapter 23:17, Shadowless Empire. White River City's teleportation hall. Once in the teleportation hall, Shifeng made his way to one of the high-class bars on the 3rd floor. Blackie and the others had been waiting for some time now. When they noticed Shifeng enter the establishment, they stood, surprised. Yan Tianxing and Yi Luofei were particularly shocked as their guild leader pulled their attention away from their 10 gold bottles of 5-colored fruit wine. So, this is a tier 3 class. Blackie had already informed the group that Shifeng had left to challenge his tier 3 promotion quest, and none of them had been particularly surprised. Shifeng had already reached level 100, so it was expected that he'd challenge his promotion quest. Although Shifeng's Nightwalker's cape concealed his aura, it couldn't hide the fact that the ambient mana actively flowed toward him. God's domain did have weapons and equipment that would attract mana to their user, but those items generally only increased the mana density around the player. However, despite so much mana flowing toward Shifeng, Yan Tianxing, whose senses were quite sharp, and Yi Luofei, who was a magical class player and only a step away from reaching the domain realm, recognized that the mana density around Shifeng hadn't actually increased. It felt as if the swordsman were a black hole, steadily devouring the ambient mana. Mana was the root of all in God's domain. A player's physical and mental condition, skills, and spells were all closely tied to mana. As players at the peak of God's domain, Yan Tianxing and Yi Luofei had spent a considerable amount of time researching the game's mechanics, especially the relationship between mana and a player's virtual body. Players constantly absorbed mana from their environments, and as players' physiques grew stronger, they'd absorb more mana. This was why areas with thin or no mana were considered forbidden lands. As a tier 3 player, Shifeng's mana absorption was astounding. If the mana that flowed into tier 2 players was like a small creek, the mana flowing into Shifeng was a raging river. Everyone's here, guild leader. We can set off when you're ready, Blackie excitedly reported. Thanks to the northern fortress, Zero Wing's overall strength had increased considerably. Not only did the northern fortress provide the huge ancient gold profits, but it also gave players a place where they could rapidly grow stronger. By this point, Zero Wing had explored multiple ancient ruins in the Gravity Mountain Range's northern region, securing plenty of precious treasure. The guild's main force members had also reached level 97 and 98 and had upgraded most of their equipment with level 95 dark gold equipment. However, their combat standards had improved far faster than their levels and equipment. As many as 26 main force members had now reached the Truth Realm. Yan Tianxing and Yi Luofei had even reached the Ascension Realm. In addition, Alluring Summer, Silent Blade, Shadow Sword, Stubborn Bone, and Zhao Yueru had entered the Flowing Water Realm thanks to Unyielding Soul's legacy training slots. Seeing how much his comrades had improved, Shi Feng was a little surprised. He hadn't expected them to grow so strong so quickly. Now, Zero Wing's main force was likely only a little weaker than Superpower's main forces. If Fire Dance and the others could make some progress in the Tower of Four Gods, Zero Wing's main force might even be able to stand toe-to-toe with the various superpowers' main forces. Alright, let's go. Shi Feng nodded as he joined the team. He led everyone to a teleportation array and traveled to the border town closest to the Cold Spring Forest. He then used the 7 Luminaries Ring spatial gate to transport the team the rest of the way. Cold Spring Forest was a level 100 neutral map, as well as a junction to other level 100+ neutral maps. Thus, it was quite far from civilization. Players would have to cross over a dozen large maps to reach the Cold Spring Forest from Star Moon Kingdom. Getting there was especially troublesome without a flying mount. Of course, Shi Feng had the Thunder Eagle and the 7 Luminaries Ring. After teleporting multiple times, Shi Feng and his team finally arrived before the cave that led to the Cold Spring Forest. The Cold Spring Forest was meant to help players transition from Tier 2 to Tier 3, unlike other level 100 neutral maps with harsh environments. Not only was this a comfortable area for players to grind, but it was also home to a large number of ancient races. The forest was also under an ancient seal's protection, so players would have to defeat the map's guardian boss and remove the seal before they could explore the map. Even with a flying mount, entering the map was impossible without completing those tasks. Guild leader, I see people. Minor Wind, who had long since reached both the Refinement Realm and Truth Realm, quickly discovered players' tracks as they arrived before the cave. It looks like there's a lot of them. I'm guessing these tracks are from a 200-man team. Others have already found this place? Shi Feng was stunned. Although this cave wasn't as dangerous as a level 100 neutral map, the monsters within were still level 97+ lords and great lords. Quite a few grand lords wandered within the cave, as well. Surviving here was no easy task. In addition, the cave was particularly dark, suppressing players' 5 senses to a certain degree. A 100-man team of current experts wouldn't last more than 10 minutes inside the cave. Even a superpower's main force would struggle to get through. There were simply too many monsters, especially since the cave should still be largely unexplored. Guild leader, should we head inside? Blackie asked. They were trying to maintain a level of secrecy. If they encountered other players, news of their operation would spread. Although they were only heading out to explore a level 100 neutral map, which shouldn't be much of a problem, they couldn't guarantee that other powers wouldn't try to take advantage of their operation. No need to worry. Let's just go, Shi Feng said, shaking his head. Even if other powers learned that they were exploring the Cold Spring Forest, they couldn't cause any problems for Zero Wing's team. Other players weren't even guaranteed to get through the cave and into the forest, much less take advantage of the operation. Following which, with Cola, Yi Wumian, and Turtledove led the way into the cave. Visibility was poor in the dimly lit cave. Even Tier 2 players could only see up to 200 yards away, and dodging ranged attacks from multiple directions would be particularly challenging in the cave's narrow, maze-like structure. Fortunately, Zero Wing's main force members had trained in the Extraordinary Tower, so they coped with the cave monsters' ambushes relatively well. With an MT like Cola leading the way, the team had little issue pushing through the cave quickly. They didn't have to come to a halt to deal with the monsters. The cave had 2 floors, and after 3 hours, Shi Feng and his comrades finally reached the second floor. This was also where they'd find the Guardian boss. Unlike the first floor, the second floor was an open canyon. It was so large that a large team wouldn't have to worry about needing room for their usual formations in battle. Moreover, the second floor was much brighter than the first. However, the suppression on players' senses had increased in exchange. Less than 30 minutes after reaching the second floor, Shifeng and his team heard explosions and noticed dazzling lights at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel led to a cavern, which contained a town. Zero Wing's main force found a 200-man team clearing out the demon-kin soldiers and guards that guarded the town, while gradually approaching an ancient giant in the town center. Every player on the 200-man team was level 96 or above, and they all wore a dark mark on their foreheads. They also radiated a faint, black glow. Even as they fought the High Lord-ranked demon-kin soldiers one-on-one, these players had an overwhelming advantage. Not even the Great Lord-ranked demon-kin guards could halt these players' advance for more than a moment. As for the ancient giant in the town center, it stood at over a dozen meters tall and had 6 arms. Each of the giant's hands held a pitch-black spear, and it loomed like the ancient god of destruction. Demon-kin soldier, dark creature, High Lord, level 98 HP 49, 000/49, Demon-kin guard, dark creature, Great Lord, level 99 HP 88, 000/88, Purgatory giant, dark giant, mythic, level 99 HP 460, 000/460, guild leader. They look like Shadowless Empire's members. It's an adventurer team from the Shadow World, Blackie said, quickly discerning the players' identities once he saw them. Shadowless Empire? It's no wonder why those two are here. Shifeng thought, spotting a familiar man and woman at the lead of the small army. Blackie's comment reminded him of exactly who those two were. Shadowless Empire had been a very famous superpower during his previous life. It had taken over the Shadow World even before the planar passages had opened. With the excellent leveling resources and special legacies the Shadow World contained, Shadowless Empire had flourished wonderfully after arriving on the main continent. 2 of Shadowless Empire's members, in particular, had forced the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion into a disadvantageous position during a contest for territory in level 100+ neutral maps. Those 2 were the same man and woman that led Shadowless Empire's 200-man team. They were the Dark Assassin, Vast Lock, and the Shadowless Ranger, Night Reader. These 2 players hadn't reached the Domain Realm Empire before moving to God's Domain's main continent, yet even Domain Realm experts had been terrified of their assassination capabilities. Once they had reached the Domain Realm, they had been akin to demon kings in the dark. Those 2 had been responsible for plenty of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's losses, even going as far as stealing one of the pavilion's territories. Meanwhile, shortly after Zero Wing's members discovered Shadowless Empire's team, Shadowless Empire's members noticed them, as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, Commander, those are Zero Wing's members. Should we get rid of them? A level 96 Dark Berserker asked, making a throat-cutting gesture as he glanced at Zero Wing's main force. I hadn't thought Zero Wing would reach this place. It's no wonder why everyone's insisted that Starlink and the various superpowers can't seem to deal with the guild, Night Reader said, chuckling. Night Reader was a slender woman with vibrant red hair. She wore epic chainmail and wielded an ancient, crimson bow, as well. It's a pity that their era in God's domain has come to an end. Zero Wing is simply wasting its time by coming here. Because the Shadow World lacked top-tier weapons and equipment, Shadowless Empire's equipment standards had been lacking when they had first arrived on the main continent. However, their equipment standards had undergone a qualitative transformation rather quickly, and Shadowless Empire's members had caught up with the main continent's players. With their advantage in terms of legacies, levels, and combat standards, not even the various superpowers with vast foundations were a match for Shadowless Empire now. As for the main continent's non-superpowers, they were utterly helpless before Shadowless Empire's strength. When he heard Night Reader's comment, the bald youth leading the team, Vast Lock, nodded his agreement. Ignore them and prioritize killing the Purgatory Giant. They'll know what to do once they realize the difference between our strengths, Vastlock said. He returned to commanding his team as they advanced on the Purgatory Giant. Chapter 23:18 Sword rises. After Vastlock declared his decision, Shadowless Empire's 200-man team accelerated their advance toward the Purgatory Giant, completely ignoring Shifeng and the others' existence. These people really don't care about us at all. Yan Tianxing could not help but shake his head and chuckle when he saw Shadowless Empire's members' nonchalant reaction toward Zero Wing's arrival. Normally, when players came across other players out in the fields, especially when they were raiding a boss, they would give out a reminder or warning to the approaching players. However, Shadowless Empire's members simply treated Zero Wing's team as if it were air and did not even bother trying to make contact. The only explanation for such a reaction was that Shadowless Empire had deemed them to be no threat and not worthy of any attention whatsoever. Guild leader, are we really not going to make a move? Blackie asked as he looked at the distant Purgatory Giant. He did not particularly care about Shadowless Empire's treatment of them. However, since the guardian boss of this cave served as the key to the Cold Spring Forest, its loot might provide them with some help once they entered the neutral map. We're only traveling toward the Cold Spring Forest. Having someone to open up a path for us is a good thing, Shifeng said, chuckling. He then instructed everyone to get some rest first. He had no intention of snatching the boss from Shadowless Empire at all. The Purgatory Giant was indeed a very important boss. After killing it, not only would players gain access to the Cold Spring Forest, but they would also obtain a special item called Purgatory Core. When activated, the Purgatory Core would create a natural barrier with a 200-yard radius that would help players adapt to level 100 neutral maps. The barrier's effects were similar to Arctic Water, except that Arctic Water was only effective for one player while the Purgatory Core applied to a specific area. For Tier 2 teams looking to grind in level 100+ neutral maps, the Purgatory Core was a very useful item. Killing the Purgatory Giant provided no other benefits aside from these two. Meanwhile, his goal was to kill the ice dragon Heathwaite and occupy the Cold Spring Canyon. To him, the Purgatory Core held no meaning. After all, once he occupied the Cold Spring Canyon, he could obtain Arctic Water much more easily. At that time, let alone a 100-man team, even strengthening a 1,000-man team wouldn't be difficult. I guess you're right. Blackie nodded, as he found Shifeng's words reasonable. He then sat down on the ground and started recovering his stamina and concentration. The Purgatory Giant was a level 99 mythic boss. Moreover, it belonged to the giant race. Its life rating was considerably high, so raiding it would not be easy. Since Shadowless Empire was willing to raid it for them, they could use this opportunity to conserve their strength for the Cold Spring Forest. While Zero Wing's members rested in a distant location, Shadowless Empire's members, who were only 500 yards away from the Purgatory Giant now, also noticed what Zero Wing's members were doing. It seems these people are quite smart. Had they dared try to snatch the boss, I'd make sure they got a good beating, a level 96 Dark Berserker said, smirking when he saw Zero Wing's members sitting down and resting. I doubt that's the case. I bet they want to use us to test the Purgatory Giant's prowess, so that they can have an easier time raiding it afterward, Night Reader said as she glanced at Shifeng and the others, a bright smile blooming on her face. It's a pity that they're looking down on us too much. Shadowless Empire was the ruler of the entire Shadow world. Its capabilities were far beyond anything the main continent's various superpowers could imagine. Although the Shadow world was only the size of a kingdom, as one of the higher standard otherworlds, it possessed resources that many superpowers coveted. However, despite the superpowers' numerous attempts to seize the Shadow world, Shadowless Empire always emerged victorious. Alright, focus. The boss has already sensed us. Everyone, get ready. Vastlock suddenly shouted when he saw the Purgatory Giant opening its eyes. The Purgatory Giant's awakening immediately panicked the wandering Demonkin soldiers and Demonkin guards. The moment the Purgatory Giant opened its eyes, everyone present felt a horrific aura wash over them, even Zero Wings members, who sat several thousand yards away. Based on its aura, the Purgatory Giant was definitely much stronger than ordinary mythic monsters. Moreover, space within a 500-yard radius of the Purgatory Giant started changing upon the Guardian boss's awakening, the gravel on the ground shattering. After awakening, the Purgatory Giant immediately advanced towards Shadowless Empire's members and thrust its 6 spears at them, the spears tearing apart the space they passed through. Just as the 6 spears were about to reach Shadowless Empire's members, 6 shield-bearing Dark Knights jumped forward and met the spears in battle, the bodies of these Dark Knights radiating a bright, black light while the dark mark on their foreheads glowed a faint crimson. Boom! 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 A series of explosions echoed throughout the entire tattered town. After receiving the Purgatory Giant's spear, each of the 6 Dark Knights stumbled only 3 or 4 steps back before stabilizing their bodies. They also lost only 25% or so of their HP, which was quickly regenerated thanks to the rear-line healers. When the Purgatory Giant started launching its second round of attacks, the 6 Dark Knights had yet to recover their balance. At this time, however, 6 more Dark Knights emerged from Shadowless Empire's to block the Purgatory Giant's spears. Like so, the 2 parties of MTs took turns receiving the Purgatory Giant's attacks, their coordination perfect. Due to their perfect execution and timing, the 12 MTs prevented the Purgatory Giant from inflicting any harm on the rest of the team. Start! Vastlock shouted. Upon hearing Vastlock's command, the Cursemancers at the rear line immediately cast Dark Devour. In the next moment, a black puddle formed beneath the Purgatory Giant's feet, the black liquid continuously crawling up the giant and threatening to consume it. Although the spell did not deal any damage, it applied a significant speed debuff. This situation instantly reduced the pressure on the team. Immediately after, Shadowless Empire's members started bombarding the boss in a frenzy. Taking the lead to attack, Night Reader drew her Crimson Bow and sent a crimson light pillar shooting at the Purgatory Giant. Minus 331,564. With just one attack, Night Reader halted the movement of one of the Purgatory Giant's arms. At this time, Vastlock had also made his way to the Purgatory Giant's back and stabbed his 2 pitch-black, glowing daggers at the mythic boss. The instant the 2 daggers touched the Purgatory Giant's skin, 2 black beams pierced through the boss, each beam causing over minus 200,000 damage. The basic attributes of these people are high. Every one of them is like a great lord. This is especially true for that assassin and ranger. Those 2 are most likely superior to great lords of the same level in terms of basic attributes. Moreover, these people can perfectly combine their combat techniques with their skills and spells. It's no wonder they're so confident in taking down the Purgatory Giant, Yen Tianxing praised as he watched Shadowless Empire's members fight. At this stage of the game, the majority of the main continent's experts were still experimenting with combining combat techniques with skills and spells. However, Shadowless Empire's members had already accomplished this feat, allowing their Tier 2 skills and spells to undergo a qualitative improvement. Just 30 minutes later, the Purgatory Giant finally went berserk. Shadowless Empire's members started activating their berserk skills, one after another, in response. When Vastlock and Night Reader activated their berserk skills, without even activating twofold berserk, their basic attributes already reached the standard of mythic monsters. As a result, they managed to endure the Purgatory Giant's berserk phase and eventually slew the mythic boss. Along with the Purgatory Giant's death, the magic barrier that protected the Cold Spring Forest started crumbling. The seal on the cave leading to the Cold Spring Forest was also removed. Meanwhile, beyond the cave, one could now see a snow-covered forest. After killing the Purgatory Giant, Shadowless Empire's members did not rest for long. As soon as they finished collecting the boss's loot, they made their way into the Cold Spring Forest. As they left, they glanced at the distant Zero Wing members, with gleeful expressions. Ha ha ha. Zero Wing's members must be dumbfounded after seeing us defeat the Purgatory Giant, the Dark Berserker carrying a 2-handed axe laughed. Although we got to show them the gap in strength between us, they now get to enter the Cold Spring Forest without putting in any effort, Night Reader grumbled. There's nothing wrong with letting them gain some advantage. Zero Wing is Star Moon Kingdom's #1 guild. Its influence also reaches multiple kingdoms and empires. If we want to establish a foothold in the main continent quickly, we can make use of Zero Wing's strength, Vastlock said. After Vastlock's words, Shadowless Empire's members no longer said anything. Instead, they simply focused on traveling to the Cold Spring Forest's inner area. Roughly 5 minutes after Shadowless Empire's members entered the forest, a deafening roar suddenly echoed throughout the forest. How is this possible? A grim look surfaced on Night Reader's face when a group of fully armed dragonkin suddenly emerged from the snowy forest ahead. However, what shocked her the most were the numbers and strength of these dragonkin. Dragonkin Fighter, Dragonkin, Lord, level 100 HP 63,000,000/63,000,000. Dragonkin Captain, Dragonkin, High Lord, level 101 HP 135,000,000/135,000,000. Dragonkin Warrior, Dragonkin, Great Lord, level 101 HP 220,000,000/220,000,000. The inferior dragon standing before their team numbered more than 1,000, and even the weakest dragonkin fighter had an aura that was no weaker than that of the Great Lord-ranked demonkin guards they faced before. As for the Great Lord-ranked dragonkin warriors, their auras were just slightly weaker than that of the Purgatory Giant. Moreover, there were 3 of them. Defensive formations. Vastlock shouted. By the time Vastlock gave his command, however, the dragonkin army was already charging at them. Although Shadowless Empire's members could barely hold their ground against the Lord-ranked dragonkin fighters, they were at a severe disadvantage against the dragonkin captains, inferior in terms of both basic attributes and reaction speed. When one of the Dark Knights failed to defend himself in time and got hit by the saber of a dragonkin captain, he instantly lost over 1/4 of his HP. As for the dragonkin warriors, Vastlock and Night Reader had to coordinate with each other just to pin down one. Stopping the remaining 2 Great Lords was beyond them. Retreat! Retreat to the cave! Vastlock shouted when he saw the 2 unfettered dragonkin warriors slaughtering his teammates. Retreating was now their only option. Otherwise, a team wipe was inevitable. Chapter 23:19, Tier 3. As if time had stopped, silence fell over the entire Cold Spring Forest. Whether it was the Dragonkin or Shadowless Empire's members, they were all in a daze as they looked at the Dragonkin warrior that had collapsed before the large tree. At this moment, not only was the Dragonkin warrior in a heavily injured state, but its silver armor even sported a large cut. If one looked closely, one could even see the white, broken bones of the Dragonkin warrior beyond this cut. If not for God's domain setting that made it so that creatures would die only if their HP fell to 0, the slash from before would undoubtedly have taken the Dragonkin warrior's life. Even so, the attack still took away a large chunk of the Dragonkin warrior's HP. What did he do? Night Reader could not help her shock as she stared at Shurfong, the person who executed the attack on the Dragonkin warrior. Previously, when she used her trump card to attack the Dragonkin warrior, she had only managed to make it stumble back 1 step. Shurfong, on the other hand, heavily injured the Dragonkin warrior with just 1 stroke of his sword. For a moment, she wondered if the main god system was playing a joke on her. After all, she was currently level 97. She was also equipped in 4 pieces of epic equipment and a top-tier epic weapon. In addition, she had a special legacy that increased her basic attributes and physique by a significant margin when fighting in darkness. Even the apex experts of super guilds were most likely no match for her when it came to basic attributes. Now, however, Shurfong, who looked very ordinary and gave off no aura whatsoever, actually surpassed her strength by several degrees. No matter how she looked at this situation, she simply could not bring herself to accept it. He is probably Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame. According to rumors, he has already reached level 100, Vastlock guessed as he looked at Shifeng, his evaluation of Zero Wing increasing by a grade. Even if he is level 100, there is no way he can have enough strength to send the Dragonkin warrior flying. We can't, even if we activated our berserk skills, Knight Reader said. Although the Dragonkin warrior was only a great lord, its strength was just slightly inferior to the mythic-ranked purgatory giants. Even if they activated a berserk skill, they would, at most, just match the Dragonkin warrior. In order to send it flying over 20 yards, they would need strength at the standard of mythic monsters, at the very least. Of course, it's impossible just by reaching level 100. However, I suspect that he has already completed his Tier 3 promotion quest, Vastlock said in a definite tone. Tier 3? How is that possible? Knight Reader simply could not bring herself to believe Vastlock's speculation. Previously, she already considered the rumor of Shifeng reaching level 100 a wild exaggeration. The Shadow World had much more abundant leveling resources compared to the main continent, yet even they, the top players of Shadowless Empire, had only managed to reach level 97. Now, however, Vastlock was telling her that Shifeng had not only reached level 100 but also completed his Tier 3 promotion quest. This was unbelievable. The difficulty of promotion quests increased with each subsequent tier. The difficulty of the Tier 3 promotion quest was especially high. To complete the Tier 3 promotion quest, players would not only have to be of a sufficiently high level but also needed to invest a lot of time into making preparations. For Knight Reader herself, even if she had made all the preparations she could, she still wouldn't be confident of completing her Tier 3 promotion quest. After all, experts of their caliber couldn't settle for a mediocre result in their Tier 3 promotion quest. Needless to say, someone like Shifeng wouldn't settle for this either. While Knight Reader and Vastlock were talking about Shifeng, the heavily injured Dragonkin warrior suddenly stood up and let loose a deafening roar, which echoed throughout the forest. Moreover, the Dragonkin warrior did not stop at just one roar. Instead, it repeatedly roared again and again. Did it get hit too hard in the head? Knight Reader found the Dragonkin warrior's incessant roaring strange. Moreover, the injured Dragonkin warrior wasn't the only one acting strangely. Every other Dragonkin in the army also started roaring. No. Vastlock's complexion darkened as realization struck him. They're calling for reinforcements. As soon as Vastlock finished speaking, a deafening roar came from the depths of the forest. Following which, a commotion broke out in the distant forest, and very quickly, a huge swarm of Dragonkin charged out of there. The newly arrived Dragonkin numbered more than 3,000, including as many as 5 Dragonkin warriors. Run! Vastlock shouted, his scalp turning numb at this sight. At Vastlock's order, Shadowless Empire's members immediately dropped what they were doing and fled for the cave they had come from, without hesitation. However, despite seeing Shadowless Empire's members retreating, Shifeng and the others still maintained their positions. Why aren't you guys running yet? Knight Reader asked as she looked at Shifeng. We'll block them, so you guys should use this opportunity to retreat. It is still too soon for you all to come here, Shifeng said before walking toward the Dragonkin army, together with Zero Wing's members. Since Vastlock had warned him before out of Good LL, Shifeng naturally didn't mind helping Shadowless Empire now. You're crazy. Do whatever you want. Knight Reader huffed when she saw Zero Wing advancing toward the Dragonkin army. She then turned her head away and left. Shifeng might have reached Tier 3, but he was only one person. He wouldn't be able to keep the several thousand Dragonkin at bay all by himself. Not to mention, 5 more Dragonkin warriors had joined the fight now. Even if the swordsman could suppress these great lords, could he suppress all 8 of them? However, before Knight Reader had gone 100 yards away from her previous position, she saw Zero Wing's team clashing with the Dragonkin army. When the two sides came into contact, Shifeng initiated the battle by executing Void Slash, using the 6 slashes his skill generated to send 6 Dragonkin warriors flying back and crashing into the Dragonkin behind them. As for the 2 remaining Dragonkin warriors, Cola stopped one of them while Turtledove stopped the other. Cola's strength might not be comparable to the Dragonkin warriors, but with the fragmented legendary rank Titan Guard and his Dragonslayer legacy, he neutralized all of the Dragonkin warriors' attacks without fail. As for Turtledove, although she was inferior to Cola in terms of both defense and strength, she had Yan Tianqing assisting her from the side. Yan Tianqing influenced the Dragonkin warriors' attacks, such that they all landed on Turtledove's shield and nowhere else. After seeing that all 8 Dragonkin warriors were stopped, Alluring Summer, Iluafe, Zhao Yueru, and the other magical class players started bombarding the approaching Dragonkin captains and Dragonkin fighters. Like a mobile turret, Zhao Yueru sent even the High Lord-ranked Dragonkin captains flying with her spells. With just one AoE spell, she created a large clearing amid the Dragonkin army. Even the Dragonkin warriors stumbled when struck by her attacks. Despite the severe numerical disadvantage, Zero Wing's 100-man team coped with the Dragonkin army without suffering any casualties and relentlessly pressed deeper into the Cold Spring Forest, suppressing the Dragonkin army thoroughly. Dragonkin fighters and Dragonkin captains died quickly, one after another, under Zero Wing's bombardment. Crap. Are they even human? An axe-carrying dark berserker, who had already arrived back at the cave, cursed aloud when he saw the Dragonkin army getting repulsed. He had had a tough time dealing with just one Dragonkin captain, yet Zero Wing's members were toying with the High Lords as if they were children. Zhao Yueru, Alluring Summer, and Yi Luofei, in particular, had devastated the several dozen Dragonkin captains with their attacks, preventing the High Lords from reaching Zero Wing's rear line. Shifeng was even more frightening, single-handedly suppressing 6 Dragonkin warriors. Let alone damaging the swordsman, the 6 Dragonkin warriors couldn't even get within 5 yards of him. Their HPs also plummeted. After only a short moment, the 6 Dragonkin warriors had already lost 1/10 of their HPs. At this rate, the deaths of all 6 were just a matter of time. How is Zero Wing so strong? After Zero Wing's team disappeared into the snow-mantled forest, Night Reader was in a daze for a long time. When she remembered how they had thought to prove their superiority over Zero Wing by defeating the Purgatory Giant, she felt a little embarrassed. She had never imagined that things would turn out this way. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Shifeng's performance, in particular, had shocked her. Every one of his actions was beyond her perception. If he had decided to contest for the Purgatory Giant back then, the consequences would have been dire. Most likely, he could annihilate their entire 200-man team all by himself. Let's return now. Zero Wing is much stronger than we initially thought. The higher-ups will need to adjust our approach to Star Moon Kingdom, Vast Lock said after giving the matter some thought. Shifeng's strength was simply too frightening. He was no longer an existence Tier 2 players could hope to contend with. Moreover, the other members of Zero Wing also possessed considerable strength. With the guild definitely much stronger than ordinary major powers, Shadowless Empire would have to tread carefully in Star Moon Kingdom from now on. After saying so, Vast Lock turned around and had everyone prepare to leave the Cold Spring Forest. As for Night Reader, she turned involuntarily for one last look towards the direction Shifeng disappeared. So what if you're Tier 3? Just you wait. I'll catch up with you soon. At that time, I'll show you just how powerful I am. I'll make you regret looking down on me. When Night Reader thought of the word Shifeng said to her before, she gnashed her teeth in anger and frustration, feeling as if she had been treated like a fool. Immediately afterward, she turned around and left the Cold Spring Forest. Chapter 2320, Level 100 Exploration. Zero Wing's members gradually advanced deeper into the Cold Spring Forest. As the map had never been explored by players before, the number of Dragonkin Zero Wing's members encountered along their journey kept increasing. Fortunately, the number of Dragonkin warriors they came across did not, so the growing number of enemies did not affect the team negatively. It only provided the team with even more EXP. The EXP granted by level 100 monsters was far greater than that of level 99 monsters. Although Shifeng had brought Zero Wing's main force to grind at a level 100 Forbidden Land before, everyone's level had been very low. As they had to rely on Tier 3 demons to do most of the fighting back then, their grinding efficiency had been considerably low. Now that everyone in the team had the combat power to contend against level 100 lords, they made short work of the level 100 plus dragonkin. As a result, everyone's experience bar increased at a very rapid rate. After grinding for just 6 hours, everyone in the team had already leveled up once. Now, even the lowest leveled player in Zero Wing's main force was level 98, whereas the guild's top experts like Yen Tianqing had reached level 99. As for Shifeng, he, too, had gained his final percent and reached level 101. However, in contrast to the team's leveling speed, the Dragonkin's loot rendered everyone speechless. Even the best piece of equipment dropped by the High Lord-ranked Dragonkin captains was level 100 Mysterious Iron rank. Moreover, this was from the first kill of these Dragonkin captains. Otherwise, the weapons and equipment they dropped would be only bronze rank. The quality of the Dragonkin captain's loot was far inferior to that of level 99 High Lords. Shifeng, however, did not find this situation surprising. After reaching level 100, ordinary experts would be able to gear themselves only in level 100 Mysterious Iron equipment. If they wished to get level 100 Secret Silver equipment through killing monsters, they needed the support of a sufficiently strong team. As for obtaining level 100 Fine Gold weapons and equipment from monster drops, that was absolutely impossible for them. Only Tier 3 experts would have the ability to grind for level 100 Fine Gold weapons and equipment. As for Dark Gold weapons and equipment, players would need both superb strength and luck. This was also the reason why, after frontline players reached level 100, the various powers of God's domain would start frantically investing in Tier 3 experts and Master Lifestyle players. Past level 100, quantity no longer mattered. Instead, what mattered the most was quality. One could say that Tier 3 experts and Master Lifestyle players were the true foundation of the various powers. Without Tier 3 experts and Master Lifestyle players, level 100 plus weapons and equipment at the Fine Gold rank or better would be inaccessible. Meanwhile, if a guild did not possess top-tier level 100 weapons and equipment, how was it supposed to develop? Level 100 plus monsters weren't easy opponents, especially after players reached level 105. Before reaching level 105, players could still rely on Dark Gold weapons and equipment that were below level 100 to fight monsters and bosses that were below level 105. However, that would no longer be possible at level 105. Past level 100, monsters would receive a significant improvement in strength every 5 levels. Without top-tier weapons and equipment of a corresponding level, Tier 2 players would not be able to contend with monsters and bosses of the same level at all, only Tier 3 players would be able to. However, players capable of getting promoted to Tier 3 as soon as they reached level 100 were extremely rare. Moreover, although Tier 2 players might have an easier time completing their Tier 3 promotion quest as their levels increased, they would still require the assistance of top-tier weapons and equipment to succeed. Guild leader, I found a parchment that can't be appraised. Blackie said excitedly after picking up a parchment dropped by a Dragonkin warrior. He then handed it to Shifeng, anticipation filling him. His appraisal had already reached the advanced standard and was only one step away from the master standard. An item that he could not appraise definitely wasn't ordinary. A parchment? After Shifeng used omniscient eyes to appraise the parchment, surprise and joy filled him. Not bad. This is a magic trap design. A trap design? Blackie, however, was disappointed when he heard Shifeng's words. How unlucky. I thought we got a design for a weapon or equipment. Traps were common in God's domain. Some players would even use traps to deal with field bosses. However, compared to magic arrays, traps were very much inferior. Some traps were even ineffective against monsters at Great Lord rank or above. However, Tier 2 players could easily deal with Lord-ranked monsters. Setting up traps to deal with a Lord would be a waste of time and materials. This is something very good, Shifeng said, chuckling. In any case, have everyone keep an eye out for it. If any more drop, bring them to me. Also, have Melancholic Side prepare the materials necessary for making this trap. Prepare as many as possible. Most likely, every player in God's domain had suffered at the hands of traps before. In fact, many experts had been killed by traps. However, as players couldn't properly utilize traps against monsters, traps never gained much popularity among players. However, traps were almost guaranteed when exploring ruins in God's domain, so how could they be useless? The reason for everyone's misconception about traps being useless was simply current players being limited to using and producing basic traps. For example, they could be used to target a group of monsters. Moreover, they could cause very high amounts of damage continuously, so long as a monster remained trapped inside them. If magic traps and physical traps were properly paired up, even Tier 2 players could live a profitable life in level 100, plus neutral maps. They would be inferior to Tier 3 players only when it came to raiding dungeons. Meanwhile, after the team killed another level 102 Dragonkin warrior, a purple glow enveloped the bodies of many members as these people reached level 100. The invisible chains that previously bound these players also shattered. Chapter 23-21, Superior Mythic. The players that had reached level 100 were astonished. My attributes are so high. And I feel so much more coordinated than before. That's not all that's changed. My senses are so much sharper and more realistic. In this state, my combat power has increased by at least 30%. Amazing. There's such a huge gap between level 99 and 100. Once I complete my Tier 3 promotion, Tier 2 experts under level 100 won't stand a chance against me. Ordinary players might not sense the changes that occurred when they reached level 100 right away, but Yan Tianqing and his companions noticed the changes immediately. They were stunned when they did. None of them had realized how great the difference was between level 99 and 100 before now. After leveling up once, their combat power had reached a whole new standard, and this was considering that most of their weapons and equipment were still level 95. If they equipped level 100 weapons and equipment, their combat power would skyrocket. Naturally, there was a major difference between level 95 and level 100 equipment. The level 100 mysterious iron items they had obtained after slaying the Dragonkin made that obvious. A level 100 mysterious iron weapon's attack power could almost rival that of a level 95 dark gold weapon, and the basic attribute bonuses were even slightly higher. It was easy to imagine how much their attack power, defense, and basic attributes would rise if they fully geared themselves with level 100 fine gold weapons and equipment. Furthermore, they had yet to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests. Now that a number of us have reached level 100, Guild Leader, we should start raiding level 100 team dungeons, Blackie eagerly suggested after experiencing the changes due to his new level. They hadn't even dared consider setting foot in a level 100 team dungeon previously. Dungeons monsters were far stronger than monsters in the fields, after all, and without Shifeng's help, they had barely held their ground against level 100 plus field monsters before reaching level 100. Trying to raid a level 100 team dungeon would have been suicide. However, they had grown considerably stronger after leveling up, especially the players with epic weapons and equipment. These players' combat power had risen by far more than a mere 30%. Now, they'd have no issues taking on a dozen or so Dragonkin warriors, even without Shifeng's help. They definitely qualified to challenge level 100 team dungeons. Not only could they test their newfound strength by successfully raiding such a dungeon, but they'd also acquire high-quality level 100 weapons and equipment. In addition, their achievement would help spread Zero Wing's fame across the eastern continent, maybe even throughout God's domain. The other level 100 players voiced their agreement with Blackie's suggestion. They were all eager to challenge a level 100 team dungeon. Don't get so excited just yet. The system's restrictions on your bodies have been lifted now that you've reached level 100, so your physical condition is slightly different. Fight the Dragonkin first and give yourselves a chance to adapt, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Smiling, he continued, if you're so eager to test your new limits, I know the perfect place for you to do that. Players' combat power would substantially increase upon reaching level 100. They could now use their 5 senses and reaction speed to its full potential, but exerting all of their strength wasn't an easy task. Even domain realm experts would need quite some time to adjust, not to mention refinement realm experts. Shi Feng had only been able to adapt so quickly because he was most familiar with this body. Although there were some minor differences between his current form and the body he had used during his previous life, he had sensed and adapted to these minor changes easily as a domain realm expert, perfectly exhibiting his full potential. A perfect place to test our strength? Where is it, guild leader? Kola excitedly asked. Unlike the others, he carried the Titan Guard, a fragmented legendary shield. Once he reached level 100, the restrictions on his shield had also vanished. As a result, he sensed a massive boost to his combat power. Overall, he had likely improved more than anyone else on the team. A superior mythic boss's lair. Shi Feng announced, gesturing to the Cold Spring Forest's central region. Every member of the team was stunned when they heard Shi Feng's answer. God's domain's mythic monsters weren't equal in terms of strength. Among them, superior mythics stood at the apex of their kind, wielding even more power than mythic-ranked archaic species. Everyone here was an expert, and they all had an idea of how powerful mythic monsters would become after level 100. Trying to challenge a level 100 mythic monster before they reached tier 3 was tantamount to throwing themselves into the jaws of death, let alone challenging a level 100 superior mythic. Relax. I'm quite confident that we _LL be victorious, Shi Feng assured them, chuckling at his carrot now. Take some time to adapt to your new bodies. A tier 4 dragon was an incredibly powerful being, but he had his heavenly dragon's breath. The ring was capable of suppressing dragons to an intense degree. Including Anna and Kite's assistance, they definitely had a chance of defeating the monster. Hearing that Shi Feng was confident of their victory, his teammates breathed a sigh of relief. They obediently followed their leader's orders and used the nearby dragonkin as training dummies. After around 4 hours of training, the team had a basic grasp of their unrestricted strength. Once his team was ready, Shi Feng led them toward the Cold Spring Canyon. The Cold Spring Canyon was far more dangerous than the Cold Spring Forest's other areas, home to many level 103 and 104 dragonkin. Even level 105 Grand Lord ranked dragonkin commanders wandered the area. If Zero Wings members had come here before reaching level 100, they would have died the moment they aggroed a dragonkin commander. Fortunately, Kola could single-handedly tank one of these Grand Lords at level 100, preventing the dragonkin from targeting any of his comrades. Once he had a hold on the dragonkin commander's aggro, the rest of the team slowly shaved away the Grand Lord's HP, eventually killing it. When Blackie looted the dragonkin commander, he obtained the Dragontooth Pendant, a level 100 fine gold necklace. Its basic attributes were more than 2 ranks higher than a level 95 dark gold necklace, and it increased the power of the wearer's dragon bloodline. Kola ended up winning the bid for the necklace, and when he equipped it, not only did it increase his basic attributes, but it also improved the purity of his dragon blood, improving his physique. Shi Feng and his team finally reached the heart of the Cold Spring Canyon after another 6 hours or so of combat. He then retrieved the transfer stone he had received from the Adventurers Association and began to chant the incantation. The transfer stone transformed into violent energy that pierced an invisible barrier before Zero Wing's main force. As the barrier shattered, it revealed a paradise. Zero Wing's members could hear birds chirping and smell fragrant flowers, and as they entered the space, they felt a pleasant sensation encompass their bodies. The fatigue from their long hours of grinding faded quickly as their stamina and concentration began to recover. This space was nothing like the outside world. However, before any of them had the chance to inspect this area, a horrific aura washed over them, so intense that it nearly knocked them on their backs. A dragon? Turning toward the aura's origin, their gaze rested on a 30-meter-tall infant dragon. Protected by its snow-carrot scales, the infant dragon was sound asleep. Every breath it took was powerful enough to shake the entire area. Ice Dragon, Heathwaite, Dragon, Mythic, Level 101 HP 1840000/184000000. When the team saw Heathwaite's statistics, they had no doubt that if this infant dragon wished it, it could likely shatter this entire space, plunging it into the void. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU dragons had always been the symbol of destruction in God's domain. The various NPC cities' libraries contained a vast amount of information on these beings, always depicting dragons as natural disasters that could bring about the downfall of an entire country. If there hadn't been so few dragons in existence, they would likely have become God's domain's absolute overlords. Are we really going to raid a dragon, guild leader? Kola asked, gulping as he watched the slumbering ice dragon. For a moment, Kola wondered if Shifeng were playing some kind of joke on them.